All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of David's Saturday Night Sit Back. Tonight, I am grateful and excited to have Jeff Murray sitting across from me. He is an environmental, horticultural, and landscape design major from Florida Southern College. His career has taken him from operations to sales and business development to now having a podcast called The Athlete's Afterlife with Jeff Murray. He's a visionary, mentor, public speaker, coach, helping men find their identity and purpose after sports. At Athlete's Afterlife, they are rebuilding elite mindsets and healthy bodies while building six-figure careers. Check out his podcast. Again, it's called Athlete's Afterlife on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. His most recent solo episode is about intentional grounding and turning penalty into positivity. And his most recent guest was Corey Hibben, and they discussed navigating entrepreneurship and life after sports. Also, if you need some encouragement, his Instagram page, athletes.afterlife, is a really encouraging place to spend some time, so I would encourage you to do so. Jeff, I'm really excited to have you on the show today. Welcome to your episode of DSNSB.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. Was awesome. Like, most people don't ever sit there and go into the old college background, and they're always like, that's so wild. Like, you got your degree in what? Like, you got your degree in environmental horticulture and landscape design. And everybody's asked me why I didn't do anything with it. And I said, well, when I was a senior and I went and walked around and did some internships with a few places, all it was in Florida, because that's where I'm from originally, and all it was me going to places and I'd be managing and leading like a landscape crew that's mowing lawns. I'm like, that's not what I signed up to do. And so like I wanted, my vision was I'm going to be designing landscapes for corporate offices, maybe eventually go into golf course work, something that was more elaborate. And then it's like, I'm just going to stick with the job I've been working at and go into leadership with that instead. And never got into it, but I've always, whenever I've owned a home, I've always had a nice yard. So I guess
there you go. That's a plus. That's like me. I'm an accounting major. I thought I wanted to be a chemist growing up. Became an accounting major. Didn't think about the fact that during tax season, we had to work 80+ hour weeks, burnt out in under 3 years, pivoted to recruiting, now podcasting, and if I never think about debits and credits and retained earnings again, I'll die a happy man. Unless it's about my own company, like that's a different story. But there's a lot of people like that where we went to college and we got this degree, and our paths took us somewhere else if we were willing to listen. Yeah, it is. It's so interesting how so many people you got to figure out what you're gonna do at an early age. And I mean, I'm 46 now, and there's still times where I'm like, do I really know what I want to do when I grow up? It's like that mentality. When I grow up. And it's and I mean, I say it jokingly to myself, but I just think the thing is we realize, and kind of what I do and what I work with people, is that our purpose is always ever evolving. And what it was as humans, every 5 to 10 years, roughly the median 7 years, we shed exactly everything of who we are and what we represent. And it's so we're always ever evolving. So why is our purpose always got to stay one type of thing? So like when people go into school and become a doctor or a lawyer, they've spent so many hours in this. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people really love it, but I'm sure there's a lot of things that they're kind of in their mind, man, I wish I had time to do this. I wish I could devote time to this. And that's why it's so important to find other passions outside of our work, because that can get really mundane at times, and to really lean into those, and who knows where it takes us. But yeah, our purpose is ever evolving, and who I thought I was going to be when I was 17 versus 25 versus 35 versus 45 has evolved completely differently throughout every single decade, but at the same time, it's like you lean in, you love it, and you're like, this is awesome. Yeah, it's interesting because you get this degree, and then is there any job, let's just say that this person is graduating between 22 and 25. And in the U.S. right now, the retirement age is 65. Is there any job, one singular job, that anybody would want to do for 43 years? Maybe a few. There could be a few.
Right.
Sports, which we'll get into in a little bit. There could be a couple athletes out there who are like, yes, if my body did not experience wear and tear, I would for sure do this till 65, or podcasting maybe, or, there's probably a couple, but for the most part, most people, I would imagine, would not live the best joy-filled, purpose-filled life doing the exact same job for 40 years straight.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the biggest determinant of that, or seeing that, is like when you see
how people's bodies slowly, I don't want to say deteriorate, but they tend to let things go. And like stress obviously creates cortisol in the body, which, starts to put, on fat on people, and things start to happen, and their bodies start to, they just stop caring about their body. And I think that's such a great, hey, what's up, man? They just stop caring about everything that really kind of got them to where they are. And their body is, if they don't take care of the temple that's their body, it is going to deteriorate. But you see people that are like, oh yeah, I love my job, and they've been in it for 40 years, but their physical fitness of everything would say otherwise,
Yeah.
It would literally say otherwise. So it's just one of those things where, what's up?
Do you have not to interrupt you, but do you have dogs by chance?
I don't know.
He has never done this to any other guest on the show.
Really? That's funny.
So you're his favorite. We're not supposed to choose favorites, buddy. They're all awesome. But
Yeah.
he has never tried to climb up into someone's lap like that before.
That's funny. I've had some people jokingly tell me I'm like a dog whisperer, and I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I just enjoy animals. I just think that they're just the most amazing things. So yeah, that's cool. Well, thanks, bud. I appreciate the love, man.
Well, there's some positive affirmation that maybe you are a dog whisperer, because he just gravitated towards you. So
Yeah,
it's cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. Yeah. So I don't know where we were at, but yeah,
What part of Florida did you grow up in?
Lakeland is where I spent most of my time.
Is that northern Florida?
It's central. It's like right between Tampa and Orlando.
Okay.
So yeah, it was dead center, Tampa, Orlando. Great place to grow up. Like it's well known for sports, especially football, high school football. But it's you're close to the beaches. 45 minutes to an hour away in any direction, and yeah, I mean it's I miss it sometimes, but Florida's such a slow moving state in so many ways. Austin is just it's just Austin. Austin's just always very progressive, and I enjoy the energy around it. So.
And you were playing sports as early as 5 years old, right?
Yes. Yeah. Actually, officially 4, but T-ball at 4, and they allowed me to start playing early. And but yeah, I got it at 5 years old, and it was really when things started taking off. I was doing that basketball, soccer. Didn't play a lot of football for whatever reason, but I always blamed it on it because I was really small for most of my life. Like my height and my weight was not one that you would typically see a football player playing at. So even in like junior high and all those things, like I didn't hit my growth spurt until like the end of my sophomore year. And at that point I was already committed to being more into baseball and soccer at that point. And then I actually stopped playing soccer, and then I just focused on baseball. So
There you go.
yeah.
Any memories jumping out from the early days of playing baseball?
Yeah, always. I mean, I would say probably, the first one that always sticks in my head is the first home run I ever hit over the fence in a game, and I was 12, but that was, and I still remember the date, which is wild. It was March 23rd, 1990. And, so it was just one of those moments where you're like, oh shit, it actually went over the fence, and I was always a good hitter, and I was always a good fielder. But it was wild at some point, even that year, I remember I went through like a little slump, and because I never had gone through a slump, but I know mentally, I just moved back from Florida. My mom had just gone through her second divorce, and I was in this like phase of like struggling with my own identity at that point of like what was going on in my life. And you're borderline teenager. I was in 7th grade at the time, and that's when puberty starts hitting for everybody, and popularity, and you're trying to be popular. It's like so much shit that goes on in your life at that time. And I went through like a little slump hitting, and my coach tried to tweak my stance, and something happened where like I lost I didn't have a lot of power after that. I was more of a singles doubles hitter. And I didn't like that, because I was like, this is, I was so used to always having some decent power, and to some extent, and then I lost that. And then it was not completely, but it was just kind of wild how where my hitting didn't go the direction I wanted to, and I got into pitching. And I was wild. I didn't want to do pitching because it was wild in the sense of I didn't want the pressure initially. And then but I was a lefty and I was a natural, like I had natural movement on my fastball. And my coach said, just do it. What's the worst that can happen? And I started doing it, and I like got obsessed with it. Like it just became everything that I wanted. And like I started to just thrive in the pressure, which I think also in turn plays into the whole hero role thing of putting everybody on your shoulders and just carrying the load. And that became such an ongoing theme for me in my life. And that was interesting that everything I did, I wanted. It was also a control issue because like you're sitting there realizing that your life is somewhat in chaos, like there's a lot of things you can't control as a kid. So why not control, have the ball in your hand at all times. And know that the game is either going to make or break based off of, my goal was like just try to strike everybody out. Yeah. I didn't even want my teammates to even field the ball. Like in my head, I'm thinking if I could just eliminate the pressure for them, they can focus on hitting, we'll score runs, and I'll just do whatever I can on the field. So it was like a perfectionist thing for me, but I enjoyed it so much, but then got burned out pretty quick from the lack of effort from like the team and my coach. And it was, and that was, I think probably that was where the ego really started to kick in for me at a young age, and realizing how your ego can get in the way of decisions that can shift the trajectory of your life.
Yeah. Do you think that you were going at an above average level compared to most people your age because of what was going on in your personal life?
I think so. There was so much that, you look at in life and you ask yourself, like, what can I control and what can I not control? And I always knew I was good in sports. But because of that, because you're always trying to, it's like, it falls into almost people pleasing in a weird way. So it's for me, when I look back and realize like what causes any child to be so obsessed about perfection in anything that they do and give 110%. I believe everybody should give 110% in whatever endeavor they try to go into. However, I was just so over the top about it. And I realized it started stemming from wanting to be a parent pleaser, and being a parent pleaser because you don't want your parents to be upset with you. When my father left at 5, after him and my mom got divorced, and realizing if my father could leave, in my mind as a 5-year-old boy, I'm thinking why my mom could leave too. Like they're both the two adults, the masculine and feminine energy figures that I just correlated everything with. So in my mind, I'm like, I need to make sure my mom's always happy. So then parent pleasing turns into people pleasing, which turns into how can I make them happy with me, which turns into always constantly trying to be a perfectionist in whatever you do. And I even in practice, I remember my senior year, a group of 4 guys on the team came up to me halfway through the season and were like, why do you always give 110% in practice? And in that moment, it just completely just ruined all of my like goals, because my coach was already kind of falling to the wayside. Like he was already giving up. He wasn't supportive. And I just looked at the guys and I said, because I don't know when my last play is going to be. I'd rather go full steam ahead and hurt myself going 110% than hurt myself going half-assed. And that was just always my mentality. And so I was always kind of giving more than most.
Yeah.
And the next year, I remember some of those same players came up to me and said, we get it now. Like, we understand why you're doing it. They didn't then, but then they came out and they said, we wish you were still here, because the team started doing a lot better, different coach. Just amazing how just a few shifts can really, we had the talent, the guys just weren't trying. Yeah. And they started trying that at a year after I left. So, yeah.
Why did you think every play could be potentially your last one? Was there a fear of like the family moving to a different school, or just if mom left, like you didn't know what that would look like?
No, I've always known that everything has an ending, and everything has some sort of a conclusion, and that I just, watching baseball growing up my whole life and seeing in just sports in general, and you see like these magnificent athletes that are just physical specimens, and they have career-ending injuries, or something wild happens. Like maybe it's a mental, they have mental health issues, and they slowly start to disintegrate, like in their, just their physical abilities, their mental abilities start impeding, becoming obstacles for their play on the field, and everything comes to an end. And it's like anything can come to a crashing halt at any given moment. It was always my way of always just kind of preparing. I've always done this prepare for the worst, but expect the best type of mentality. And I just always saw things from that perspective. So when I walked away, because people were like, oh, did you play semi-pro or pro or college? And I'm like, actually, I didn't. I said I had 6 scholarship offers coming out of high school, and I didn't take any of them. Turned every single one of them down. I was so pissed and so angry at the way things evolved my senior year. It was, it pushed me so far away from the sport. It was, like, I went into my senior year, like I even had a quote in the senior yearbook that said, where do you see yourself in 15 years? And I said in the yearbook, the quote said, I see myself winning I'd be 33 at that time. I'd be winning the American League MVP in the World Series, and I'd have a wife and 3 kids. So my mind was I would be playing baseball, the thing that I loved, and I'd have a wife and 3 kids, none of which came to fruition. I had 2 wives at one point, but not at the same time, just so people know. That only happens in a few states, right?
It's a Florida thing.
Yeah, Florida man strikes again. As you want. Exactly. Separate times, 2 different wives, but no kids. Never went and played ball, and it was professionally. And people were like, how did you walk away from that? And I just said, my ego got in the way. I was like, I don't want to put up with this kind of bullshit at the next level or any level. And I said, but I was burning myself out because I played obviously regular ball during the school year, varsity. We played during the summer ball. We had fall ball, and that it was always like, and you're going, and I enjoyed it, but I got to a point where I wasn't enjoying the teamwork because nobody was giving the effort but again, that's where not understanding, because you wanted so much control. I think if I just stayed and played first base my whole life and never got into pitching, maybe I would have kept going, because in my mind, I was trying to control everything at that point. I was trying to control my outcomes, everybody else's outcomes. I was expecting people to put in the effort I was putting in, when now I see life, I'm like, I don't expect anything from anyone. I can only show up the best way I can. And if I show up the best I can't control what they do. I'm just going to do whatever I can. And I realized that even though I was leading by example, it didn't on the team. It wasn't translating enough. And I cut it all off, and I pushed I didn't watch baseball for a while. Like jerseys, you see a lot of people who wear jerseys all the time. And I always I just would make fun of people that wore jerseys because,
Really?
of their favorite athletes. And because to me, I just was like, oh, they're just clinging on to their glory days. And like, I didn't realize how much of the anger was always just still pent up inside of me because of how things ended. But I chose to end it, but it was such an egotistical place in my life. And up until really about a little over a year ago, when I finally started doing the Athlete's Afterlife, or when I had this vision of doing this, I realized like I never forgave my coach. I never forgave the players. And I went through this whole process of forgiveness and I also people would say, do you regret anything in life? And I'm like, the only thing I regret was not going forth and continuing to play.
Yeah.
But now I don't regret it anymore, because I'm like, it taught me what I was supposed to learn at that point. And I didn't learn the lesson, and I just kept reliving certain pains and certain things. And I think that's the thing about it all, that you realize looking back, don't regret any decision you made. It taught you what you needed to learn in that moment. But I went through all this forgiveness of that time period, and I finally did all my final forgiveness earlier this year of my coach, as somebody was asking about it. And it was wild. Like a couple months later, I hadn't heard from this guy in forever. And a couple months later, he just reaches out to me out of nowhere. And I'm like, this is fucking wild. And and I just sitting there thinking to myself, what does he have to say? But with all the work I've done on myself, I just said, you know what? I don't know what his life's been like. I don't know, but maybe he just wants to talk, and I need to be, strong enough and be cool with the whole situation. I was, and I said, like, yeah, let's chat. And he just apologized to me for not being there for me and in that time period. And he said how he thought I was literally like his favorite player, the way that I just worked so hard and the way I was doing like all these different things for the team. And it was wild that it happened. This is 8 years later. And I'm looking and I'm like, I was holding on to this resentment all this time. And finally I came to peace with it and forgave. And all of a sudden he comes in, and it's just so weird, like energy and how the universe works. And to see that it happened like a couple months later, and it was such a great conversation to have with him, to be able to have that peace and that clarity that he needed and that I needed. And it was awesome.
That timing's incredible.
Yeah.
I've been looking for a word. I don't know what the word is, because I don't necessarily want to use blessed. I don't want to necessarily use lucky, but I feel like 99.9%, let me just say 100% of the guests that have come on the show have all just delivered this really special, unique message. I'm like, how does this keep happening? I like how you just said it's the universe. We could chalk it up to that yeah. The universe is helping the right people say yes to coming on the show, and the right people say no. And that's why, in this case, I'm really grateful to be in a place in life where the rejection, if you even want to call it that, with people not coming on the podcast, I look at it as a good thing. I'm just like, all right, cool. You weren't like, it wouldn't have benefited me, you, the audience. No one would have benefited from that. So like, thank you. I'm glad that you're in tune enough with yourself to know that like for one reason or another, this was not the show for you to be on.
Yeah.
And then when people say yes, it gets me really excited, because then I can start deep diving into what are we going to talk about and what is that going to look like. And it's just been an interesting view on like, rejection is not necessarily a bad thing. It just depends on your perception of it and how you're going to, deal with it, I guess.
Yeah. It's rejection is so key. It's I've talked to so many people about coming to terms and joy with rejection and understanding that it's just, it's rejection. A lot of people say it's like redirection into something else. And I totally believe that it is. I also believe that rejection is also not necessarily like you don't need to go down that path again. You just need to reimagine what that path looks like. So it's not always that you need to be redirected, but maybe it's just ejecting you back out to this other version of yourself, to a further version, so you can be more of the observer of the situation, see things from the bigger picture and be like, that's where I was wrong in going in this direction or going about it in this way. And you can see the full picture. So like the rejection can eject you back further so that you can be the observer to see everything and say, okay, that's what that was doing, and this is how I need to approach this moving forward.
Did you, to go back to your high school days and wrap that up, so did you play the full season of baseball, or so you did that and then turned down all the scholarships? And then what were you doing the next couple of years after that?
I ended up going to Florida Southern College, which they had a great baseball program, and I didn't get a scholarship offer from them. However, I remember the coach telling me at the end of my senior year, his name was Chuck Anderson, and he goes, if you just work out over the summer, he said, you'll get a scholarship with us. And again, the ego was just like, fuck it, I'm not working out. And I was just so burned out and so pissed off. But my family was like freaking out, because they're like, this has been your whole life. Like, what are you doing? And I went, and, beginning of the season or beginning of my freshman year, they were having some tryouts for like some additional like walk-on spots. My family was like, you need to try out. And when I graduated high school, I was throwing about 84, 85 miles an hour on my fastball, not blazing speed, but I had great control, and my speed was gradually increasing year over year, from just because my mechanics were getting better and
I was just getting stronger, but I didn't work out that whole summer. And my family was like, just try out. And I was like, I don't want to try out. So, but I did, just because I was like, just to appease everybody, and I did well in the tryout, but my fastball, like, it like dropped, like, I think it was almost 10 miles an hour over the course of about 5 months of not playing. It's just interesting how we can build something up. I think if I had worked out, if I worked out, I probably would have gotten even faster, but you don't work out those muscles. It's just like anything. You start to lose things. And maybe you don't lose the form, you don't lose the mechanics, but the speed behind everything or whatever, just like a hitter trying to hit a fastball for the first time if he hasn't swung a bat in forever. So it's, but I didn't make the team, but I didn't want to make the team. And it was at that point I just kind of went down this path of just self-discovery, trying to understand who I was outside of sports. I also didn't want to play because of not my parents, thankfully, but my other family members that were really pressuring that. And also my grandmother, remember her saying, like, I needed to make it in sports because I wasn't smart enough to it's just so weird to think about. I laugh about it now. I'm like, and no, I wasn't like, school was so boring to me. So I just didn't really, it had to really capture my attention for me to do well. So I just went to college. I was really shitty in school for the first like year and a half. I didn't study. I partied a lot. My mom actually worked at the school as in the business and economics department. And it was embarrassing for her because she thought I had a learning disability because, like, grandma was right. So, and then I went and had some tests done, and they're like, no, he's actually really intelligent. It's just school's really boring to him. And so it was why. And then my mom's like, she's like, you need to start doing better in school. Like, you've made me nervous this whole time. And so I finally got my grades up, and I started devoting a little bit more time to school. And I got it.
Poor mom.
Yeah, I got my degree in 4 years. And, but it was interesting. I started working in retail sales, and it was, and that was the job that I kept after school. And I just kept doing that because I got married right after that. And I got right after college, I got married like a month later. And it was, she was going to grad school up in Philadelphia, and the job that I had, they had work up there too. So I just was like, oh, this is great. I can just transfer. So it was easy from that perspective, but I wasn't following my path, my energy, and what I wanted. But I was in leadership. I was in a management role, and I just was like, oh, this is cool. Whatever. I went after that. We were up there, and I ended up starting to go back to school for getting a pharmacy degree. And I got all the prereqs done and then went through the first divorce. So, yeah.
Did you, I'm assuming you like to learn.
Yes.
Did you find out what kind of environment you do like learning in? Since it sounds like it wasn't your traditional classroom with the lecturer up front and 40 other kids in the room.
Yeah, I love learning in a hands-on like situation. Like, give me something tangible, either to work with my hands in the physical, like on the job type of training thing. Like it's kind of like people ask me, it's like somebody who says, oh, if you want to get good at golf, go to the driving range, you got to practice. I'm like, I'd rather just go on the course. And if I hit it in the woods, I've got to figure out mentally how I'm going to get out.
Right.
I like to be in the mix of the shit and figure it out. It's something, and I don't know if that's masochistic. I don't know what it is, but there's something about me that enjoys being in the middle of the shit and trying to figure it out. I feel there's a lot of beauty in that painful experience and trying to pull yourself out of it. So I'm more of that type of a person. Like, just put me in, coach. I'm ready to play. Yeah. Even if I'm not ready to play, like, let's do this. And like, it's going to be uncomfortable, but there's a lot of beauty in that discomfort instead of just sitting behind and reading a book in a classroom or watching a teacher lecture.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I don't know if, I'll have to ask some more guests as they come on. Maybe not on the mic, but I'm the same way. I think when I first started getting ready for the podcast, my buddy told me, had someone who sort of advised me along the way, and he's like, all right, first figure out your mics. And then when I looked at podcasting mics and I saw how many dozens of options there were, I remember I was just texting him. I was like, "Can you just tell me what to buy? Like, and don't say the most, like the $500 mic, please, like say a different one." But yeah, I just wanted to get like all of this done so we could just start actually talking. So I feel like we sort of have that in common of like, can we just do the thing instead of reading about the thing or lecturing about the thing? Like, let's just do the thing. That'd be great.
Exactly. Well, it's kind of, it's like reading it. I think that's the other thing too about like our education system, that it is so. I look back at the way I looked at school, and I see things as a way of. I was kind of already realizing that our traditional way of going through school is actually not very healthy. Like, it doesn't really prepare kids for things, and I saw that at a young age, and I just, because maybe that's part of the reasons why I got so disengaged with school to begin with, but it really doesn't really prepare you for life. A lot of the things that we're going through, and so much, it's like reading a book. You know, people always brag about, I've got quite a few books, and I've read a lot of books, and I read 3 books this month. That's great. Did you implement any of the shit that you learned in them? Like, to me, it's like, what point do we start to stop all of the education and actually start implementing? And that's kind of like doing what you said with the podcast is, let's just get the shit, let's get it on the road, and I'll learn as I go. Yeah.
There's this kid, shout out Caden. He's not a kid, he's a young man, but he came on the show. He's 21 years old, was one of the first guests, and I asked him if he reads any either personal development, business books, like anything that would sort of help him get to the next step of running his own business at 21 years old. And he said no, like just very quickly, just didn't even think about it, just said, no, I don't read. Yeah. I said, really? Why not? Because I was just curious, like there's so much knowledge out there that you could go learn from. And he said, well, think about all these people who wrote these books. They didn't have that book. So what they did was they started their business and they made, 10, 15, 20 years of making all these mistakes. And then they authored that book. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend 10 or 15 or 20 years making mistakes. And then I'm going to write the book.
That's brilliant.
Go to just rip that mic off of there, buddy. Drop it on the ground, and there's your episode. We're done.
That's epic. For a 21-year-old to say that, like, I wouldn't have thought about that at 21. No. That's amazing. That's solid.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Yeah.
While you were going through college, was there a point that you missed baseball at all, or was your ego and the resentment just so strong that missing it was never even a factor at that point of life?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I didn't miss, I got to the point where I started missing watching it a little bit. And I remember when I really got back into watching it, which was, I think, when a lot of people got back into watching it, was the Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa home run chase in 1998. And I realized the passion that I always had for the sport. I was still kind of bitter about everything, but I was just like, man, I do miss watching, and I do miss the sound of the game. I miss the smell of the grass. Like, I miss all those things. Even like one of my all-time favorite movies, Field of Dreams. Like, I used to watch that pretty religiously. Like, it was just a great movie, and I stopped watching that for years, and because it just was too painful for me to even like go through that experience again. And but yeah, I got back into it, and I did start missing it. Like it says, around 98, my junior year, I got back into kind of watching it. But it was those first few years and I played intramural sports, and I was like, where it's like the co-ed and those types of things where you're competing against everybody else. And I did well with that, but it was, it was just more of I didn't want to hold on to that energy of just the stress of playing with people that I felt like didn't. And there was a lot of guys on the actual baseball team at my college that were very, they just thought their shit didn't stink. And I don't, for me, I'm like, because they had just won a national title for Division II in baseball the year before I got there. And some of the guys on the team were just, some of them were great, but some of the other guys were just very, Yeah, they just thought their shit didn't stink, and I just don't have any patience for that. Like for me, now I do, but I mean, then I was like, let your actions speak louder than your words. Don't be a shit talker. Don't be whatever. Just I've never been someone that talk shit during a game. I've always let my actions speak louder than my words. But they just, after that and living off the high of winning the national championship, a lot of the guys that came back that next year were just really. They just thought they were amazing, and I'm like, oh, you're only as good as the next day, So
I'm curious. Do you recall how they did the following year? Did they keep that title up for a while, or?
No, the following. Wow, that's a good question. I know. I don't think they even went very deep into the playoffs that year for that division. I think that there was a lot of humbling for a couple of years actually. After, and then they started getting back into, I think they ended up winning. The next time they won a national championship was at least a handful of years later.
Yeah.
But I think that's the thing. It's like humble, being humble to some extent is good. You don't always want to live constantly in that state. You want to know that you're good, but you don't want to brag about it. And I think that there was a lot of energy around, we're better than everybody else. And I'm like, as soon as you start having that mentality when you're on top of the hill, there's a lot of really hungry people crawling to try to take that away from you.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they were prepared for that mentally as young men, just letting their egos get in the way as well. So
I remember being that around that age too, that whenever I had a friend who, was on that high horse, it gave me such a motivation to kick their ass.
Right.
Even if it's just like a video game,
Yeah.
And you don't realize that you might be hurting yourself because now you're lighting a fire under my ass to try to work that much harder to
Exactly.
topple you off of that horse just because I want to get you to shut up for a few minutes. So it's like I've never thought about it from that perspective before, that you're sort of shooting yourself in the foot with all that arrogance in more ways than one.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no place for me with arrogance. It's like you said, as soon as you do, it's like you're literally fueling somebody else to be like, "Fuck you."
Right.
I'm gonna bring you down, and that's okay. And I'm gonna do it with a smile on my face too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Your first, or maybe not your first relationship, but your relationship right after college. Did you guys meet in college, or how did that come about?
Yeah, we met in college at a fraternity party. Interestingly enough. And I didn't even end up joining the fraternity, but it was, we met, and, it's wild to see how it all unfolded. But yeah, that was, I look back and I'm like, yeah, we shouldn't have married. It was, but again, it was the lesson that was supposed to be taught to me, so I don't regret it. And
Right.
It was, I remember she was getting ready to go the next year. I was in my senior year, and she was, a year older than me, and she was getting ready to go to graduate school. And I just remember telling her dad one time, like, oh yeah, I'll move up there with her, and we'll just, I'll work and blah, blah, blah. He's like, well, you can't live with my daughter if you're not married to her. And I'm like, okay, I'm 21, at the time. And I think to myself, okay, I guess that's just the next step. So we got married. We dated for total of almost 3 years, and we were married for 3 years and got divorced. So, and we separated beginning of June, and we were divorced by mid-July. It was just so quick. It was like, boom. And she wanted to get lawyers involved, and I said, no, just take whatever it is that you want. And she pretty much took everything. And I was left with like nothing, no vehicle, no money to my name. She took all the money that we had in savings, and I just was like, well, at least she got it, and a lawyer didn't. So I just was like, start over. And I was 25, just turned 25. So, or no, 24. Yeah, I was 24 when we got divorced. And so it's always just interesting. You're like, man, like by 24, you're already divorced. Yeah.
Yeah, I think by my brother, he's kicked things off pretty young too. He had his first kid at 19. The second one may have been by 24. But yeah, he also started life early. So
Yeah.
some people be doing that.
I would definitely encourage younger adults now to not, if they can avoid it, and not that you don't have to be with somebody. Like if you love someone, but don't rush into
something if you don't feel like, if you saw a lot more of your figuring out of things, because none of us really know ourselves at that age. We're still trying to get that and understand that. So I think that's part of looking back. It was like, yeah, I was trying to, in my mind, live out the dream of what everybody thinks is the American dream, is you get the corporate job and you get benefits and you have a wife and a couple of kids in the house with the picket fence, and life's all peachy keen, and and it's not. No, that's not really. That wasn't what it was, Yeah. And it is for some people, but for me, it wasn't. Like, there was more to it, and I wasn't I wasn't living out my purpose, and I was living for other people and not for myself, and that ends up coming up because you're always constantly trying to ensure everybody else is happy around you, and yet you're suppressing your own joy, and because you're always trying to make everybody else happy. Yeah.
So when I was getting ready for today, I found some stuff about your childhood a little bit, found a lot of stuff about the athlete's afterlife, which we'll rapidly get to.
Yeah.
So after that divorce, and I guess sort of up until when you were like 39, 40, 41, what was sort of going on in that era of things?
Yeah. Well, I got married again. Didn't learn my first lesson. So
in the sense of like, it was just a super quick engagement, or
yeah. But that's the thing, is like, I was so, again, it's kind of, ego is designed to protect, but it also gets in the way. We design survival tactics at a young age that help us because we're out of control, because we're living underneath a parent's roof. But as we get to become adults, we do those same things if we don't ever learn the lesson, which they typically don't serve us. And I was so convinced I would never go through a divorce. Like, in my mind, I saw my mom go through two. I'm like, I would never treat a woman badly. I will never go down that path, whatever. And when I went through a divorce, I was so rocked that I recreated basically the same person I didn't create the person, but I attracted the same person, just in a different body form. They both had Native American in them, which was, very interesting connection with there, but they both came from very interesting scenarios with their background. But I just was so convinced I was going to make this one right, that I just said, people are like, wow, that's so quick. But in my mind, I'm like, if love is going to work, it just takes two people willing to commit to each other, and really learn how to fight together and learn how to work and battle through life's obstacles and difficulties. So I just said, there's no timetable of how long you have to date someone. I dated my first person for 3 years, and we were divorced after 3. I dated her for 3 months. We got engaged, and we were married after 11 months, and we stayed together from 2004 until 2012. We separated, and then we divorced officially in 2013. But it was never really a healthy relationship. We were more like friends that just slept together in the same bed, is how it kind of got to feeling. And we didn't argue a lot, because there were points in the relationship where, and I continued to work in the same corporate job that I had coming out of college, and I just was despising my life. It started like, I was always this optimistic kid, and then the slow drip of just corporate world and just the energy and draining situations started to get to me, and I slowly started becoming this less optimistic individual and looking at everything. And I remember having this moment in my life where, like, I realized people were like, oh, your marriage is so great and you guys never argue. And I just thought to myself, I'm like, if they only knew the reason why we don't argue is because every time we would, like, I'd have to sleep in the spare bedroom for 2 or 3 days in a row. She wouldn't talk to me. I'm like, this isn't worth it, And intimacy wasn't good. And it was just like, like I said, it was like literally like dating a best friend that you would occasionally sleep together. And it was just so wild and just unhealthy and unfortunate. And we got into this, it was going into like beginning of 2012. I remember she wanted to start having kids or trying to have kids. And I didn't know how to bring up the difficult conversation, because every time we get in an argument, and I just had this white flag moment where I wrote this like 7-page letter of like, I want us to build this thing together, but in order to bring children into the world, I want to make sure that we're aligned on things, and morally, ethically, intimately, like all these different things. Like, I wanted to make sure we were on the same page. And
It didn't go well, and kind of saw that coming anyway. And it ended up doing, I would say the one thing that I don't regret this either, but this was like one of a tale of understanding of how what you resist persists in life. At the tail end of the marriage, I had an affair at the end of the marriage. And it was very, it was one thing I always said I would never do because my mom was cheated on as well. And I said I would never do that to a woman. And that caused me to spiral. Like, and that was with one of my posts on Instagram where I talk briefly about it. But from like 2012 to 2014, one bad decision after another. And it was, I kind of, it was when I had that white flag moment and she kind of blew up on me from that letter and me just trying to work things out and say like, let's do this, but let's do it together. And if we can make this work, like let's have this in a much more unified direction. And I caved. I felt trapped. I felt stuck. And what I didn't realize is that's exactly what happened to my father was he would never speak his truth. He would never use his voice. He would never, when things went wrong in the relationship, he just wouldn't speak his truth of things that he wanted. And because we suppress and repress certain things, we end up feeling stuck and trapped and depressed, and we end up lashing out in unhealthy ways, and he did what he did. He had an affair on my mom, and then I did at the very end of the relationship, I did the same thing. And I worked so hard to not be my father that's exactly who I became. And it was wild because that's what happens in life is when we resist anything in life, it's going to keep pressing against us. It's always going to keep being there until we actually embrace it and accept it for what it is and who it is. Like if I had accepted my father for that and said, hey, he's human, he did what he did, he didn't mean to hurt my mom, he just didn't know how to express his emotions and feelings at that given moment, I probably never would have had an affair. I would have been stronger in that moment as a man to be able to stand up and say, this isn't going in the right direction. If we can't do this amicably, then we may have to, part ways. And so that sent me spiraling really bad. I kept making really bad decisions with, and in directions in life, sabotaged my career, which I didn't want to be in any way anymore, but didn't know how to get out of that in a healthy way. And I ended up getting to a point where I didn't even care if I lived anymore. And I remember kayaking. I was supposed to go with my buddy, and he canceled last minute that day and to go kayaking with me. And I really needed to be and vocalize some things, just get stuff out of my head. And I went anyway. And I remember like going out far enough into the water on the Gulf where I felt that if the tide took me out, I would just let it. And this was in beginning of March of 2014. And I felt like I just sat there for like an hour and didn't even move. And then in that moment, I remember looking around and just seeing how beautiful the world was and just realizing I kind of lost myself. And I just said, okay, I'm going to turn around. And I decided okay, I've got more to live for. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be uncomfortable, but I'm going to work each day to try to be a better version of myself. And that's when I got more into the mindset space again and started really focusing in on mindset and shifting the trajectory of my life. And it was a very pivotal moment for me. And and that was I was 36 going on 37 at that point. I took a job doing door-to-door sales because I hated rejection. And I was like, I need to learn to get comfortable with rejection. And I found so much joy. And again, it was almost like reliving being a pitcher, having that pressure on your shoulders and knowing that your actions and everything you do is going to be very determinant of how the game turns out. So like going into and knocking in doors in a neighborhood and realizing like you're the most hated person in the neighborhood. And it taught me so much about human interaction. I always tell people like, it's not a glamorous job, but it's by far my favorite job I've ever had because it taught me so much about life. and especially with where I was at that point in my life. And it was I would encourage, if I ever am blessed to have children, I would encourage my children right after college to go or after high school to go and just do a door-to-door sales job, because it's so impactful on who you can become. And and that shifted my trajectory on so many different things of how I just felt okay with being rejected. And I'm just like, again, it was just a redirection or an ejection to show me from a more of an observer level of how I can reapproach something in a better direction. So
at first, did those rejections invigorate you? Did they motivate you? Did it just sort of depend on the day? Like, what was your gut? First off, actually, I'm curious, what were you selling?
Home automation and security.
That's cool.
Yeah,
it's a good service. It's not like you're selling
vacuums and stuff.
I vacuum today, so even everyone could use vacuums. But no, that seems like a relatively like a product no one would be upset at you for, right? But I'm sure you did come across multiple people who were just like,
"Oh yeah,
what the F are you doing here?"
Yeah, I mean, I remember one lady. The first few weeks were really tough. I remember one point sitting down in a neighborhood communal area, and there was like a play set. And I was sitting on the end of the slide, and I was just sitting there thinking to myself, "What the fuck am I doing?" And I'm like, I could quit. And I remember that was like my moment of like, I could quit right now. I could quit. I could leave. I could just whatever. But then as I sat there for about 45 minutes, in my sorrow in like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? I just stood up. I'm like, no, fuck this. I'm going to go with this, and I'm just going to keep going, and I'm going to keep learning. I'm going to keep getting better. I'm going to keep evolving in this role because I signed up to do this, and I'm going to do it. And it was kind of another breakthrough moment for me in that realizing of, it doesn't matter what you're doing. It's how you do everything you do in life. It's how you show up each day. It's the effort that you put behind what it is that you choose to do in your life. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're in sanitation work and you're a garbage man or if you're a doctor. If you show up and you give 110% in everything that you do, and be the best that you're going to be, you're going to impact other people around you. And I think that's when I started to realize again the power of just showing up in a way that I could impact even the people in the neighborhood that didn't like me at first. And my goal became at that point to be the most liked person in the neighborhood, where people just like wave at me as I'm walking by. And it got to that point by the end of the summer, and I was like, this is amazing. Like, I've totally shifted everything. And it sent my life into a much greater trajectory of what I had even imagined going into that summer. And I just thoroughly enjoyed the process. But it did start to become a motivation thing. Every single day did start to, I got into such a healthy routine of life. It was because we'd go 6 days a week for like 9 hours a day, and it was in the Texas sun and 100 degrees outside, as you know, in the Texas summers. Yeah. And I had to wear long sleeves because I had some tattoos, and they didn't really want us going knocking on doors. We wanted to have the best foot forward and not look like we're, trying to rob the place, even though we're selling security is what it is.
Isn't that funny that back in, what year would have this been?
2014.
This was still in 2014. Okay, I'm trying to remember when the gym I worked for, I'm pretty sure that they they let employees stop covering their tattoos at some point because that mantra of, oh, you have tattoos, therefore you're a criminal, that started to go away.
Yeah.
But it's still funny to hear, like, that was only 10 years ago, that we were thinking that.
Yeah. And it's, in certain parts, like the neighborhoods, I wasn't working in like the more chill, like, keep Austin weird neighborhoods. It was more of the Round Rocks, the Pflugervilles, and stuff like that, where people are a little bit more conservative by nature. And I mean, there was a couple of doors that, I got the cops called on me a number of times just because I didn't do anything wrong. They just didn't want me in the neighborhood. And I would just keep showing back up. And people saw the relentlessness of my persistence. And that's where I started to coin this idea around passive persistence. And that's how I've always approached sales, is I'm passively persistent in the way I go about doing anything in life. I'm never going to be the over the top salesy person. I'm never going to be that person that just pushes and pushes. Just going to keep showing up. Just going to keep being there. Because I know that in anything in sales or anything in life, you may have like a number one company or number one thing that you always work with. You're like, no, this is my company. This is who I always work for. That's cool. I don't want to be the number one. I just want to be your number two. And that's my approach. I want to be your number two. Because I know eventually the number one's going to fuck up. And when they do, they're going to get pissed because that's what people do. And then they're going to be like, who's my number two? And then I'll be the number one. And then it's just that passive persistence, like always reaching out, same time every week, just consistent, just repetitive. And even when I would get kicked out of the neighborhoods, it was like, I just show back up and people are like, what's he doing here? And then all of a sudden, like they'd call the cops again. I'd show back up again because I'm like, I was allowed to be there, but they just didn't want me there. So eventually I'm like, they're going to realize I'm not doing anything wrong.
Right.
They're just angry about whatever's going on in their life. So it was, that was such a big key thing for me, is that passive persistence of always just like showing up. And I remember one time in Texas too, this lady, like, I'm just trying to sell her like a home automation system. And she's like, if you take one more step closer to me, and I wasn't even stepping, I was just standing where I stand. She's like, I'm going to pull out my gun. I'm going to shoot you. And she like had her shotgun like right next to the door. And I'm like, okay, here we go. So that was, there's not many times you get your life threatened in front of you, but it was like, hey, I'm like, you know what? I hope you have a great day, and I hope that gun keeps you safe and protected, because you know what? The problem is when somebody does break into your house, they're going to steal your guns too.
Right.
And now the guns are in the bad person's hands. So we're just trying to create a system to where they can't even get your gun. So, but keep that mentality. It's good.
That would have been hilarious if like the next day you had shown up and you're like standing on the sidewalk and you somehow get her attention to like look out the window, and maybe on some like cardboard posters you had painted like, when they do break in, switch the card. They're going to take your guns first, switch the card. So you should get a home security system from me just to like fuck with her a little bit.
Yeah.
Or you may have got shot if you did that.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, either way, she probably would call the cops on me, but weirdly enough, she didn't call the cops. She wasn't one of the ones that did, but it was always just it became a game, and it became competition again, which was what fueled the thing that I was missing from sports.
Yeah.
Which was always interesting. And the sales is like a sport in essence. So yeah.
One thing I like about the passive persistence is that there's so many, not so many, but there's a lot of teens at the gym that I go to who are between the ages of like 15, 16, 17 for the most part, maybe a couple 18 and 19-year-olds who are looking at some of the influencers, let's say, and they want to be with that size right now. And even the other day, I brought one of my buddies in there as a guest, and one of them came up to us and was talking to us about like, dude, I wish I could be bigger, and I've been in here like working so hard for so many years. I'm like, you're 15, but whatever. And so
years or months,
right?
Yeah.
So many months, so many days.
Yeah.
And when he walked away, my buddy Nick was just like, how old is he? Do you know? And I said, yeah, he's either 15 or 16. He maybe just had a birthday. And he said, he's 16. Like, why does he care?
Right.
Like, why is he not out there like playing Nintendo games? He's like, and he's been out of the gym for a couple years. So he's like, is this just a shift that I've missed because I've been working and at home and not in the gyms? And like, I don't know, dude. Like, I feel like it's over the last like 5 to 7 years, especially with like more social media, more of us having phones, more of us comparing to each other. We want this thing now. And it's like, dude, at 15 years old, you're never going to look like this guy. Like, He's 25 years old. So he's 10 years ahead of you.
Exactly.
That's 10 years of lifting. That's 10 years of diet. That's 10 years of passive persistence of showing up at the gym. Like he didn't look like that at 15. I almost guarantee, not even almost, I do guarantee you, he did not look like that 10 years ago. But they just, these guys, they want it now, and it's like, just, can you be content with where you're at? And you're pretty jacked at 15 anyway. So like, celebrate that for a couple years,
100%. Yeah. It's our society. It's like everything is so readily available. And I think that so many younger people today, they want things immediately. And I hear people say stuff like, I want to just make an impact in my job right away. I'm like, but you're getting hired. Like, they don't even know you. Like, You can, but it's, don't get down on yourself, and don't get down if like you're not already a manager or a leader in the company if you just got hired 4 months ago.
Yeah.
That's the people that are in those roles typically got in those roles because they were passively persistent in working towards the thing. And it's just about understanding the journey and enjoying the journey and finding joy in that and learning to embrace that that's what life's about. It's not about the goal, because the problem is when we're always just focused on the goal. Goals are great. But once we get it, if we don't enjoy the process of getting there, we're always going to be chasing the next goal, and it's never enough. And it's never enough to move ourselves into the direction that we feel is, he's like, I don't like that.
Yeah. That is contending this point.
Exactly.
He disagrees. He's part of the give it to me now generation.
Exactly. He's like, no, I want the bone now.
Yep.
But yeah, so it's always that I need the immediate gratification, and there is time for that. But then at the end of the day, it's like we have to find, and that's part of the thing. It's like the process is, well, we're never going to be satisfied if we keep just chasing one goal after another. Goals are great, but it's the point of enjoying the process of that goal is really where life is lived. And that's why you see people that are multimillionaires that just aren't happy with life. You're like, how could they be, depressed? They've got all this money. And I'm like, because they're not enjoying the process of getting there. It doesn't matter what you do for a living. As long as you enjoy what you're doing, you're going to have a much more wealthy, which I always tell people, like, wealthy shouldn't be spelled WEALTHY. It should be WELLTHY, because it's like your internal wealth of who you are and how well you are internally is really going to be the catalyst for a much better life. And your mental state and your internal state is going to be that much further along than people that may on the surface level look like they have more than you.
Yeah. So you're selling these security systems door to door. It's 2014?
2014, yeah.
And you're in Austin already, you mentioned.
Yeah.
What brought you out here? Do you recall?
That job, actually.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
It was pretty wild. Like, I was in Florida, and they were like, oh, we're going to send you to Austin, Texas. I'm like, fuck that. I don't want to go to Texas. And because in my mind, I'm just like, I'm not a country guy or whatever. And all my friends were like, no, I think you'll really like Austin. It's different. They have this whole keep Austin weird thing. And I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. And I went out, and I fell in love with the city. And I drove out there and lived on whatever I could fit in my vehicle. And I was there and about right at the end of the summer, I just said to myself, I'm going to move out here. I said, fuck it. I'm just going to go back home, pack myself up. I'm just going to go. And so I was out here for 5 months. I went home, packed myself up. A month and a half later, I was back out here. I got back out the day before Thanksgiving of 2014 and was living out here permanently at that point. So, yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Over the next couple of years, you're living in Austin. And then I did notice that one thing that was interesting about your Instagram page is that it went from a lot of nature shots, whether it was rivers, animals, sunset. And then in 2020, around the same time that I noticed on your LinkedIn, when you fired up, it was originally Athletes Afterlife?
No, it was actually originally, it went through a number of different names, but that's when the coaching started, yeah, officially, end of 2020, yeah.
And your Instagram sort of switched from being a lot of nature shots to a lot more motivational quotes or workout or whatever. I saw it. He's in a different mindset now, or maybe not a different mindset, but it was a very clear. You could tell like something was happening in 2020. Did the pandemic have any impact on any of the shifts that you made that year at all, or was it all just coincidence that you started coaching that year?
Absolutely. No, I'm glad you asked, because it really did. It was weird because all the mindset work I had done up to that point, because, and I was in 2020, I was now living in Atlanta, Georgia. I left Austin for like 4 years during that time. I went to Florida, then to Atlanta, and then I came back to Austin almost 2 years ago. But I had done so much work on myself, and I jokingly tell people, like, I would have challenged my mindset against almost anybody at that point in my life. Like, I had done so much work mentally realize like you can overcome any obstacle in my head of like, no matter what, your mindset reigns supreme is what I was living in. And my journey over the last couple of years has proved that completely wrong, but we can get into that in a bit. But when COVID hit, I was with somebody that was just a bit of hypochondriac about the whole thing. And I was just like, whatever, I don't really, to me, it didn't seem like it was going to be any different than like a really bad flu season. But I just, I kind of went with it. I'm like, she's going through her own thing. She's dealing with her own issues. But I saw a lot of people struggling with the transition of being at home all the time and her included actually. And I started talking to people and helping people with their transition just because I was okay with it. I was talking to people about because I was a sales leader for a healthcare company at that time now. And I was always telling people control the controllables. Like, what can you control? And, there's always these like you can control this. And I'm like, it comes down to two things. You can control your reaction to something that happens to you or for you, however you want to verbalize that. And you can control your proactiveness of how you go about anything in that given day. So, and how you control your reaction is really going to catapult in what direction you decide or your destiny or your journey is going to go. And I said, you can't control any of this shit that's going on around you with COVID, but you can control your emotions, you can control your reactions and what it means to you. So for me, I started helping people through that process, and it had for years people telling me I should do something in coaching or motivational speaking or something and like along those lines. And finally, I just was like, well, I'm 43 at the time. I'm like, I might as well fucking lean into this, whatever this looks like. I joined a coaching program, and with a buddy of mine who was here in Austin. He started it, and that's when I kind of got into it. And that's because everything was social. Everything was like, you got to create this social view of yourself. And I used to I deleted a lot of pictures on my Instagram at the time because there was a lot of beer pictures too, because I love craft beer. Definitely a craft beer fan and a whiskey fan. But and I've toned that down a lot over the years. But I had so many pictures of like craft beer on my thing. I'm like, if I keep the same Instagram page, it's probably not the best thing to have beer pictures everywhere. So I cleaned up my Instagram page and left some of the nature stuff because there was a lot of inspirational writing that I would put towards it, like write my own poetry or whatever. Yeah. And I just kept that, and then I just started posting the motivational, inspirational stuff for the coaching at that point. And everything kind of shifted at that point with how people were, what we see on social is, it's what we want people to see a lot of times. Right. And that was a whole other learning lesson in itself of understanding, like, at what point can we really just start being real on these platforms and just show people the pain and everything behind other stuff,
Yeah. It's interesting. Two things. First of all, I have plenty of whiskey here. So if you would like to enjoy a glass before you leave, let me know. I'm happy to pour us some. Cool. The other thing I was thinking about was with social media, if I was like, let's say I was having a bad day right now, and my reaction was to, I'll go with what one of my friends did that he was telling me about a couple months ago. He got so upset over whatever the situation was. He had a remote of some sort within hand distance, and he grabbed it and he held it like this and just started smashing it on the desk until the thing shattered to pieces. So imagine if right before he did that, he was like, "Hey, Jeff, I'm angry today, so I'm going to make an angry post on Instagram," and you just film him jamming this thing into the desk, and then in all caps, "I'm so upset about," like, people would think he was psychotic because we don't post the bad days, and I think it is just because, like, how would or do you post yourself crying? If that's your reaction, maybe it's not breaking things, maybe it's crying. And so I'm not defending it. I agree that social media definitely portrays a certain aspect of it, because when you are going through those like negative emotions, how do you put that out there? But then also I've heard from a few friends that when they do, they get shit for it, and people are like, oh, Jeff isn't actually really in a down place. Like, he just wants attention, or he's just a victim. And it's like, well, maybe that's his outcry for help, and now you're shitting on him for him just telling you how he feels, and he's doing it through Instagram when maybe he should have picked up the phone. I don't know. Social media is one of those things. Like, I use it to market the podcast. I get in, I get out, I find some guests, and that's about it. Because any more than that, it's just it's too much of a thing for it's a tool for me, not a place to give updates on my life. That's just me, because I don't know how to appropriately feel that thing, you know. And Thad has a page with like 20 cute dog pictures on it, and that's about it. That's about as far as we go.
Exactly. That's such a valid point, man, because it really is. It's interesting because there is, especially in this space that I'm in, and for anybody that listens to this, I'll probably get shit on for saying a comment like this, but it's my truth. And one of the things I've learned over the last couple of years, stepping outside of mindset, as much as I still focus on mindset, is learning to use your voice a lot more. And my truth is that there's a lot of, I don't like the word toxic because I think it's overused, and I'm tired of Britney Spears being front and center because of the damn song she sang years ago, still to this day. But I'm like, for me, I use like words like pernicious or unhealthy, just unhealthy energy, unhealthy energy or pernicious energy within the coaching space. And there is a lot of, I'm going to tell you about my pain, but almost to like make you feel connected to me, but it's a form of manipulation. It's in order to say, hey, I've gone through and done all of the stuff. So that's why you A, should work with me, or that's why A, or B, I'm better than you, or it throws off an energy that perceives. And that's why in Austin, it's so wild because there are so many people that are coaches. Like if you're, I don't know if you've run into that, you meet people at a networking event, and it's like every other person's a coach of something.
Yeah.
And it's just, what in the fuck is going on? Like, you know, it's just gotten so over the top. And for people that aren't in the space, because I have a lot of friends that aren't, they're just fed up with how many people are coaches. And then, of course, I'm not certified in coaching. I don't have an ICF certification. I don't really even like label myself. When I tell people what I do, people are like, oh, so you're like a life coach for former athletes? I'm like, not really. I say, don't really look at myself as a coach. I see myself as a transition guide, someone who's a mentor, someone who's, because I don't do things by the book. Because I know that through dozen years of therapy and also people I know in the coaching space, therapy is like, there's like a breaking point. Like therapy is designed for taking who you are and going backward and trying to figure out like your past and understanding why you do certain things the way you do them. Coaching is like taking where you are and finding the way forward. So there's a clear distinction, but the I guess similarity in both of them is that they're all designed to just keep asking questions. And I get it. Like we want people to figure out the answers. We want people to know the answers and for themselves, because at the end of the day, it's like it is some sort of gratification. It also helps them digest it better, helps them understand and embody the shifting and the change better. But there's also times where people just can't get the fuck out of their own way. I know from experience for my own self. So I know that there are times where you just need to step in, and instead of just keep asking questions and keeping a client for 6 months, 9 months, a year, 3 years, 5 years, 12 years, whatever the fuck it is, you need to just tell them, you need to do this. Enough's enough. I know you don't want to do this, but you need to do this. Because worst case scenario, it doesn't work for you and we try something else. But you, at some point, you have to have a pattern interrupt. You have to break their pattern because they have to see a way, because there's something, you're only spending an hour at most a week typically with somebody. Mm-hmm. And so there's another, 24 times 7, however many hours, it's 196 hours or something like that in a week that you're not talking to them. And especially with therapy, where like you don't
you don't have access to text them with anything. And you expect that person to shift. And the first question people ask typically is like, how was your week? Then they go down the fucking rabbit hole of shit, and it's just like nothing gets solved. And like at some point you want to see results. So for me, I'm like, I'm going to give a blueprint of, I'm going to help them peel back the layers and ask them certain questions to figure things out. But then at that point, it's like, how can we make this a lasting shift? Now that you know where things are, or why you are the way that you are and the way you're doing things, or how to understand what you need to do next, but how can we make it a lasting, like atomic habits type of situation to where you're constantly focused on, stepping into your truest essence and becoming the best version of yourself and not allowing yourself to regress. Because the problem is like you do those things, and in coaching spaces and all this stuff, it doesn't, so many people regress back to who they are because there wasn't any kind of system put in place to help them. They get to a better mental state and they're like, oh, good, I don't need my coaching anymore. But you never helped give them a blueprint to work from, to help get them going in a direction to make it sustainable. So then they come back to you, and it's just kind of a wicked cycle within the coaching space that I've seen, is that people are always like needing that gratification. And I'm like, when do we just start giving people that understanding that they're valuable enough just as they are, and they don't need you? And like, how can we really start helping them to internalize that to where, but then again, that's where the money doesn't, as a coach, you're not getting that consistent money if you're always spitting your clients out after 3 months and you're not working with them. So for me, I don't see myself in that way. And there's, in the coaching space, it's, I just see myself as someone who wants to be a planter, like I was mentioning before the show, like a planter of seeds for people, someone that gives them the tools to succeed. And then if they really need it, just hold their feet to the fire. Cause like, to me, a coach isn't always someone who just asks a bunch of questions. Like if playing sports growing up, your coach was like in your face telling you what you need to do. That's my idea of a coach. And so for me, I'm going to tell people sometimes, like, you're going to get some tough love and some hard truth, but it's something you need to shift your direction to help break you out of this pattern that you're currently in, to make you see, though, that life is and can be extremely beautiful, but you need to break that pattern of where you're currently thinking and where everything's currently residing within your soul,
Yeah. I got a coach for the podcast, and he is similar to you in the fact that one of the things he told me in our very first session was, he said, your friends and your family, even if they see something that you're doing wrong, they're never going to tell you because they love you and they don't want to hurt your feelings. Right. And he says, I'm going to be the guy that tells you what you don't want to hear. It's like, oh boy, buckle up, here we go. Yeah. But I'm incredibly grateful for him, because after every time that we've met and I have implemented everything that he has observed since our last meeting, I take a relook at, even, let's just go with the YouTube page as an example. He didn't touch it, but he said, if I were you, here's what I would do, here's how I would do it. But you also need to implement like your own marketing to a sense, because it's your show. It's not Ryan's show. So you need to, like, here's what you're going to do, but then run with it. And then I had a month to work on this assignment. And when it was done, I was very proud of it. And I was like, this looks like a professional page that's being run by a professional business, and I will brag about this all day long. And if Ryan hadn't been there to give me that tough love, he never said your YouTube page sucks, or like, you're an idiot, what are you doing? He just said, here's what I think we could implement, and here's how. Try it and see what you think. Yeah. And because I'm not a marketer, and because I feel like this is really not my only talent, but like, this is what I'm good at, is sitting down with you and having a great conversation. Yeah. The part after this and before this is where I struggle, and so because I know that, and I'm willing to set my pride and my ego and let Ryan sort of help me drive this thing, it's come out a lot better. Whereas if I was super prideful, I probably would have fired him by now and been like, I don't need you telling me how to run my podcast. Like, it's my show. It's not Ryan's show. So I just bring all that up to say, like, I personally have a coach in my life right now, and I love him because he is the one person who's willing to say, this is what we need to work on right now. And if I listen to that, things typically end up being better as a result.
Right. Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. Do you mainly only work with athletes? Is that 100% of your clients right now, as far as like the coaching and that space goes?
I mean, as of who I have presently, yes, but I have worked with former veterans as well.
Cool.
They go through the same energy, same identity and purpose loss, trying to figure out what that looks like for them after they've left their time in service. And I occasionally have people that don't look at themselves as a former athlete. I work with people still just because, I'm not going, if I see someone that could benefit from what, like my knowledge and the things that I've gone through and my expertise and whatever I've been working on myself, and they can benefit from it, then yeah, I'd like to help them out. Cause at the end of the day, it's like being of service to somebody at that point. And, but yeah, to me, I just feel that everybody should have someone in some capacity that they can find in, a mentor, a coach, a therapist, maybe multiples. But
Sure.
I think that it's, I mainly work with athletes just because they always tell you to niche into a specific area. So that's my niche. It's like I work with athletes, but it's kind of like, because Tony Robbins, when he first started, he helped men stop smoking or get.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
It was something along, like that was his foray into the coaching, like that type of a space. And of course now he helps, but they always want you to like start out in a very specific area. And then as things evolve, you start helping more and more different types of people. But yeah, he got into it from that type of space. He was like helping men stop smoking or, transition out of quitting smoking and stuff like that. So it was interesting that was his beginning. And of course now he's like the guy,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. The first influencer.
Yeah. The first influencer and that's how life coaching came to be, was through him. But he's not even a life coach, but people were like, oh, he's basically a life coach for people. And
Right.
then somebody in our Western worlds decides, oh, I can monetize this and create a course where people have to pay me thousands of dollars a year to get certified. And I'm like, the first life coach is Tony Robbins and he's not even certified, Granted, he's amazing, but it's, that's how it all kind of came to be. And it's, that's what we do with everything. Every certification out there is like yoga and stuff like that. It's overseas where it originates. There weren't people doing certifications. There's just people like training in this practice. And now, in the United States, we charge people, thousands of dollars to get certified to teach yoga. And I get like there's a part of it, but I'm like, I don't think you have to have certifications behind your name. You can study and learn these things on YouTube or all these other avenues. You don't have to have a bunch of acronyms and letters behind your name just to feel justified and worthy and valued to do it. Because at the end of the day, your clients, all they want is results.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's another person who, I'll leave her name out of it, but she is a personal trainer and is pivoting her business to be more coaching. And she's doing the exact same thing. She's like, if I have 20 women that want to work with me once an hour every week, I don't feel the need to go get that license to now. Hold on, everyone. I'm not ready for you yet. Let me go get this thing. She's like, I'm ready, Yeah. And so she's sort of at this weird like halfway point where about half of her time is spent towards the coaching, half the time is spent towards the personal training, and she's even funneling a third factor into it. But it's not her episode. That is neither here nor there, except to say I agree with you that if life skills and experience trumps a lot of what we might learn in a 6-hour course or whatnot. Now, being that you said you work with the military as well, I'm assuming that you don't work with anyone from any particular sport. You're not like, since you're an ex-baseball player, you're not only working with baseball players. You would work with a hockey player, a football player, someone from the Navy, the Marines, all of those different branches.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you find a common thread amongst the people you work with, or is it each person as they're transitioning either out of the military or out of sports, do they all seem to have a common theme about them by chance?
I mean, yeah, it's really, and that's kind of, before I started it, I interviewed and talked to a lot of different people that were former athletes at different levels. And the common theme is a sense of loss, that loss of an identity of something that they dedicated their whole life to and now is no longer a part of them. And they continue to hold on to that energy. And I know a lot of people are like, well, I'm always going to be the athlete. I'm always going to be this. And yes. And I think that in my perception, what I see is if people are always identifying as I'm always going to be that person, they never allow themselves to be the person who they are now after sports. And their sense of purpose, again, you're in the spotlight and people are cheering for you all the time. And now all of a sudden that's gone. They feel that everything else occupationally is never going to live up to the same thing that they did as an athlete, because they don't have the immediate gratification of the adulation that happens from that type of thing, and the common thread is that identity and the purpose, the loss that always happens after sports. Almost most athletes go through a period of depression, and I call it like situational acute depression. It's nothing that you need to get on medication for. We're definitely an over-medicated society for sure, and it's something that you just need to work through and understand why you're feeling this way, and understand. And a lot of it is there's so many things tied to our past that we don't even understand, and that's when a lot of the work I've done the last few years, outside of just focused on mindset, it's more internal, inner work of our body and who we are as human beings. And that is the part that I've really focused and honed in on, because what I realized is, and through the work I've done, is there's so much trauma that we've incurred as children. And PTSD is not just for military veterans. Anybody can suffer through PTSD based off of certain situations. And, you see things where, say it's like that, especially like inner city kids, that their only escape in essence of life is to get in and play sports and to make it into that sport. Like they're so hell bent on that, but there's no training, there's no working with them and coaching on how do you manage your money properly? How do you make sure that you work through and heal the parts of you that, and most people don't even know they have to heal, but they were running from something to get into that sport. And kind of going back to what I was saying about my father earlier, where I was resisting being like him, but what we resist persists. If you're always running from something, it's like running from your shadow. There's a lot of people that talk about your shadow work. You're never going to outrun your shadow. It's always going to be right there. Like no matter if the light's in front of you or behind you, it's always somewhere in your surrounding you. So you can't outrun the darkness. You have to embrace whatever it is, and you have to embrace and become that person. You have to embrace all of you, accept all of you, because there's different levels of frequencies of the human body. And one of the biggest things, and when we're working on ourself and our awareness of things, that we get to a level of self-love, but we fall back down, and we fall back down into like a discovery phase of trying to understand who we are, and an understanding phase, because we never come to a level of acceptance of all of who we are. Because once we accept everything we've done, the pain we caused, the pleasure that we've enjoyed, all of the shit, all the good, the bad, the love, the loss, the hate, everything of who we were up until that very moment, if we can't accept that, we will regress back to that temperature setting of who that person was. And that, in sports, like you get an inner city kid that's running from that existence of, like a poor upbringing and not a great family home or something along those lines. They all of a sudden exit sports after being a professional, and they lose all their money. They fall right back into that same neighborhood, that same existence, because they never healed the thing and never came to terms and peace with the thing they were running from. So they immediately, that thing is always still present. So when the one thing that was their escape is removed, that thing's going to be right there. And it's going to capture them again. It's going to bring them right back to that person that they were. They're going to be like, why am I back in this state? It's because we didn't actually work through the internal trauma and the healing of why we got into the sport to begin with. so that we could actually remove ourselves from that existence and actually operate in a much healthier, more self-aware and more self-conscious state.
I've never thought about that before. You know, I played basketball through my sophomore year of high school. And I never thought that, you know, and this is not to say that this is all professional athletes or even a big percentage, but that there are some athletes out there who, between the practices and, like you said, the praise and the camaraderie and even just the busy of it, you know, I'm so busy going from practice to the game to now we're on the bus and now we're on the plane and we won the thing and we lost the other thing. So we need to, and then all of a sudden when it comes to a screeching halt, that thing that you never dealt with from 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, it's still there waiting for you.
Right.
I've never contemplated that could even be a thing within sports, the military, or even musicians, or I guess like anyone who's just is living this, you know, like a fast-paced lifestyle where there's also maybe some like fame that's being or a spotlight of some sort, that there's just so much going on that it's sort of easy to suppress the shadow for a couple of years. But then when you get a moment to stop and reflect, you're like, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
He's still there.
Yeah. And it's and that's where a lot of times addiction sets in because, you know, so many, especially in athletic world, you know, you become so obsessed with becoming the best at something in this high intensity environment. And when that exits, you search out other high intensity things, which drugs, alcohol, maybe it's thrill seeking sports of like driving cars fast or being on a motorcycle and driving really fast. And it's, you start to seek out other thrill seeking environments, and that can cause a very wicked spiral of a negative outcomes on your life because, you know, you got in a lot of people, they get into sports for different reasons. But a lot of times it's their parents living vicariously through them. So that, you know, turns into parent pleasing, which turns into always trying to show up as the best version so that your parents will be proud of you. And when that's gone and that's taken away, the sport or being, you know, in the military, or maybe it's being, you know, any occupation, musician or whatever it is, it doesn't matter. And that's gone. There's a sense of like, am I even worthy of who I am? And I'm afraid to see what that looks like. So then we're always constantly trying to stay busy, and because we're always trying to find ways to prove our worth and our value. And the best way to really do that is to get totally comfortable with sitting in the stillness and the quietness of just your own person and your own self and your own thoughts. And there's a lot of emotion there. There's a lot of tears that are going to come. There's a lot of pain that is going to come up. But when we can get comfortable with sitting in that stillness and allowing things to come to us and receive, because as men, we're masculine energy. We're always doers and we're always like, go, go, go. But we all have masculine and feminine energy in us and entwined in us. Both male and females have both. And when we learn to embrace the stillness and just sit and receive whatever comes, it's uncomfortable and it's painful. But in those moments, beauty usually starts to come once you start getting through the other side. It's there's a lot of beauty in that because, you know, we're always trying to find a way around things, but the obstacle is the way. You know, the obstacle is the journey through, and the only way to the other side is through. Like, you can go around it all you want or brush things under the rug, but eventually you're going to trip over everything that you've been trying to brush under the rug, and those obstacles are going to keep getting bigger and bigger, and you're going to be wasting more time, whereas you just need to like run through it. And it's kind of the theory of like the cow versus the buffalo theory, where it's a cow typically, when a storm comes, it runs the opposite direction because it doesn't want to deal with the storm, where the storm keeps chasing it. So the cow is actually living in a prolonged state of anxiety and fear, and eventually tires itself out so much to where all of a sudden the storm just still rolls over it. So it lives in a heightened state of fear for a longer period of time because it's afraid of the storm, where the buffalo charges into the storm because it knows it's going to be maybe not what it wants to experience in the moment, but it's going to get through it a lot faster. And on the other side is the sunshine that it's looking for. So and that it's like looking to get to. So it runs through the storm. So it's like, how do we approach the storm? How do we live with suffering? How do we approach those things? Because life isn't always, rainbows and butterflies. There's a lot of darkness in life, and there's a lot, and the more that we embrace our darkness, I know the person that I've been talking to, she always tells me I've got a lot of dark energy. And I joke about it because I'm like, I love Batman. So, I mean, what do you want? So, but I thrive in that because I know there's so much power when you can curate anything that has been a dark part of your past and use it for good and use it for power. And when you learn to embrace that, nobody can fuck with you on anything. Like, someone could come up to me and say, yeah, I heard you cheated on your second wife. You're right, I did. Absolutely, I own it. Like, nobody can fuck with me on that because I don't run from that anymore. I hid it for so many years. But now I'm just like, yeah, it's a part of me. It's part of who I am. It's part of what created me, and it's part of my journey. And, is it something that I condone for people? No, but is it a part of like that aspect of me? Absolutely. And so when you can learn to embrace those things and use it and spend that part of your life and to turn into something powerful and good, so much beauty can come from that. And that can only really happen when you learn to finally just sit in the stillness and embrace that quiet part and like learn to just sit with yourself and not consume your time with all these other things that could consume your time. And you just sit there, and sometimes life forces you to do that, whether it be financial reasons or whatever, where you just don't have money to go out anymore, or you've pissed everything away, or there's just other things, or you've pissed off enough people to where now you have to sit by yourself. But when you finally just can force yourself to do it, that's one of the things that I try to help people with, is like, just embrace it, lean in. It's going to be painful. It's going to hurt. But when you can start loving that side of yourself and all of yourself and embracing that and accepting everything that you are, that's when love for yourself really cultivates into something more beautiful and sustainable.
Do you find that, because are most of your clients dudes right now, or do you have a mix of male and female?
Most are dudes. Yeah.
Would you say that, do most of them have a hard time talking about terms of self-love or talking about their past because maybe they were raised in a 20, 30 years ago, or even more? I have one buddy who's like in his 20s that has told me about a certain situation that, he doesn't cry about it because his dad raised him in a way that, men don't cry, and it's just something that we don't do. So because they're coming to you, do they already have an expectation of like, all right, we probably will be bringing up some shit from the past, we might be talking about self-love, or do some of them have like a wall up that you sort of have to break through when they're just like, fuck this guy, and like, love myself, like, give me a baseball, like, do you run into that a lot, or are most of them pretty receptive at going through, once they've been working with you for a couple weeks or a couple months and exploring these things?
Yeah, it is. Men are really tough to penetrate, I guess, with the wall and the armor that they've built up over the course of time. And it does start out. It's becoming more acceptable for guys to finally lean in to feel emotion and be okay with it. But yeah, a lot of times it is. It's people that you come across and people I work with that I talk to are very much still heavily in their armor. And that's why it is tough to even get clients sometimes, because guys are so difficult because they think like, oh, I don't need help. And I'm like, well, if guys didn't need help, then suicide rate wouldn't be 3 times as high as men than it is in women. Like, you need help. You just wait too long to actually address it. And whereas women are much more proactive, they're much more grounded in those senses, and they know when their emotions, and they feel their emotions much more than guys do. So they're able to work through things better. And they also are more in tune with wanting to look in and tap in and better themselves in a way of an emotional intelligence that's so much strong. Because so many people look at like stoicism and all this as like an emotionally intelligent man, and I'm like, it's not always. There there's a lot of pain there with sometimes with people that model themselves after stoic type mentality, and yet they're suppressing a lot of that pain because it's just like overpower, overcome, mindset. And to me, it's not about overpowering and overcoming. It is to some extent, and it's also about embracing everything that your emotions are feeling, because you're feeling those for a reason. And if you suppress them, they get stored in your body somewhere, because your mind is like, I can't hold on to this. And if you don't have a proper way of processing it, it pushes it into parts of your body. And then when certain things happen in your life, they'll come right back up and you'll feel that same thing again. You're like, why is that happening? Like, why do I feel that emotion again? And then we just push it back down. And guys just really struggle with that energy because they feel like they don't need help. And then there's always, guys are always comparing themselves to other guys. I'll see guys that come to me and they just think, well, if he can do it, I can do it. I'm like, absolutely you can. And, I hope that you do it. But if you have any inkling that you feel that you need a little bit of assistance or a little guidance, like I can help you for a few months and we can work together and I can get you further along in the process. The only reason why I do what I do is because I don't want people to go through the amount of years that I went through to figure it out. Yeah. You can do that path and that's great.
Sure.
However, I don't recommend it.
Right.
But
learn from me.
Yeah.
Let me take 3 years of pain off the trajectory of your life.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like learn the journey a little bit faster. And that's, success leaves clues, and I'm definitely not better than anybody else. And I always tell people, like, you don't need me. You could do this on your own. But if you want to quicken the process, then that's what this is about.
Yeah.
And so to me, I see myself as just a conduit for that type of energy. Like I just try to be someone who can guide people, but I tell them, like, this isn't going to be a typical coaching thing that you hear people do. I'm just going to really push you through, because that's what you need as a guy. You need somebody who's literally going to be throwing your feet to the fire on that stuff. But yeah, guys, to fully answer your question, they're difficult to work with because they have the armor. But when you can finally start to peel back the armor, develop that rapport, develop that trust that it's okay, you start to see a side of men that's extremely beautiful and passionate that they just felt like they couldn't show because of what life has taught them and how they've been conditioned.
Thank you, by the way.
Yeah, man.
I'm really enjoying this.
Yeah.
You mentioned suicide amongst guys is 3 times higher than women, and I found a post that I wanted to read back from you from November 19th of 2017. I took out some of it just for the sake of time, but the meat of the post is that as part of Movember, every year on the 19th of November, International Men's Day is recognized in over 60 countries. This year, they are focusing on men's and boys' health, improving gender relations, gender equality, and positive male role models. One stat that was alarming to me is that male suicide is 3 times that female suicide. I mention this because we need to start creating positive change and being inspiring role models. When was the last time you went out of your way to help someone in need? When was the last time you went up and spoke to someone you didn't know just for the sake of being friendly? When was the last time you reached out to a long-lost friend and expressed gratitude for having them as part of your life? I love that one. We need to step away from our ego. Let's start focusing on being superhumans instead of selfish humans. We have the innate ability to change someone's life with just one interaction. This is a skill we must continue to cultivate to create a positive change. Be bold, be brave, be you. Peace, strength, and love, Jeff. First off, I absolutely love that post. And I do love that you ended with be bold, be brave, because it can be scary, I think, especially in these days, like for one guy to give another guy a compliment, like, oh, what if he thinks I'm gay? Or like, oh, what if, like, it's just weird because dudes don't often just randomly compliment other guys in the gym. But it's at least in my circle, from what I see in the gyms I go to, it's not something that's prevalent. So the question I sort of wanted to ask you is, you brought up suicide tonight. You mentioned this in this post, but I saw it in a couple of posts. Is there any particular reason that suicide is a passion of not a passion, but it's on top of mind for you? Or would you say it's not necessarily that you're driven by decreasing the suicide rates? It's more of you just want to see men in general live healthier, happier, more peaceful lives.
Yeah, it's that. And I just want to commend you on like pulling that post up. I actually know exactly what post that is. I had a Superman shirt on.
You did
in that post,
yeah.
And I remember that post. And when reflecting 2017, I mean, that was 6 years ago almost that I wrote that, because it's during November, and I wasn't even thinking about the coaching space at that time, but it was that you could already see like where my mindset was in trying to help people at that point. Like had been doing in that energy and thought process for years. So thank you for sharing that. I haven't looked at that post in a long time.
Totally.
I was like, oh, that was good.
It was all right.
Yeah, it was all right. Yeah.
It was good. It was good.
Yeah. And, but it was, it's the suicide thing is because I went through my own darkness where I contemplated. I didn't care. I wasn't strong enough mentally to even think about trying to do it myself, but I just thought I love nature, and I thought if Mother Nature wants to take me, then she can take me. And that was 2014, and just to think like how much I grew from 2014 and that to where like that post was, and understanding my journey, my pain, my suffering, and realizing I wanted to help other people do it. But guys, and the reason why I talk about suicide and mention it is because it's not I forgot what author it was, but they say most men lead a life of quiet desperation. And it's in that thought process of we aren't using our voices. We suppress so much. Like we use our voices in ways that make us feel worthy of things, like whether it be in sports, whether it be whatever, but we don't know what's going on in the person's external world because we don't know what's going on in their internal world. And, mindset's great. All of it's good. But the problem that I see is that none of us really know who we are at our core. But yet we do know. And the thing is that we keep suppressing it because we don't feel the world will accept us for who that person is. And that's why suicide, because it's for men, it's like we want to show emotion, but we're told that we're not supposed to show emotion. Mm-hmm. So then we just suppress that emotion, and then we exert it out in unhealthy ways. And then we just feel like we're just not doing enough. We're not doing enough in the world. We're not doing enough for our family, and it's never enough. And we're always constantly just pressing and pressing instead of just embracing things. And that inner child of everyone, whether it be a woman or a man, but that inner child just wants to be the person that they always thought they were going to be before the world impacted its painful truth on that child, and that child's world changed forever. So when I do like my breath work sessions and things like that, and I go through guided breath work sessions, and I usually things pop up for when I'm like 5-6 years old. And it's wild that the breath is so powerful in itself in a healing mechanism. It's more powerful for me, breath work, than going to therapy sessions, because going with a very clear intention and then through the breath work. Have you done breath work much at all, or?
No. I had one other guest that took me through because I wasn't familiar with it, I said, dude, let's do 60 seconds. Okay. That is the max of my breath work knowledge and experience so far. Okay.
Yeah. So I would encourage, there's a lot of people that do. I'm not certified to do breath work, but I've been to enough, like I understand like the concept of how they go about their stuff, but I wouldn't guide people through it. I guide people through just like simple things like box breathing, or like short sessions, like things like that within a couple minutes. But to go through a whole guided thing of where I'm talking people through a process, it's very emotional for a lot of people. There's a lot of tears, there's screaming, there's a lot of stuff that goes on. But when you go through rhythmic breathing, what happens at a certain point is it's kind of what happens in a dream state. The pineal gland opens up and releases DMT into the body, which DMT is like a hallucinogenic aspect of, causes hallucinogens and like things and visuals, and you start to see things, and through the guided process, you'll start, all of a sudden things will start popping up, and you're like, what is that all about? Like you'll see things within like your childhood and stuff that happened to you as a child, or things that you're reliving moments as a child, or even as an adult. It shows you with the intention of when you set the intention of going into it, whatever the intention is, it shows you what it needs to show you. Same thing with plant medicine. And it shows you all of those pieces that you need to work through. And it's in that where you have to integrate afterwards. The breath work doesn't heal you. It just shows you the way and what's possible, and to come to peace and to terms with certain things in your life. But it shows you that to where you can start to form a new neural pathway and a new paradigm, a new belief system that isn't attached to this traumatic experience as a child. Like for me, like when my dad left, I never knew that all of it was surrounding abandonment issues. And whenever I was in a relationship with a woman after that, I was afraid that if they got mad at me, that they would leave me like my father left. And so it was always attached to abandonment. So it was, and now I don't do those things because I've learned to heal from that and realize that that's not me. And I'm more empowered to come and respond in a more conscious state and an aware state of who I am and who I should be in this present moment. And I don't have to operate from that child that was wounded from that past experience. Because when you do things as a child for survival reasons to please everybody or make people happy, you get awarded for that. Like, oh, you're such a good son, or you're like, oh, you're such a good boy, and this, that, and the other. And so you think that's a good thing to do. And because you get patted on the back for it, that continues into your adult life until some people learn it fast. It took me a while to learn because I was really fucking stubborn. And, so, but that's the thing. It's like, and because we build up these walls and these armors, and armor is the ego. And ego is good in some regard. It eventually gets to a point where your body can't take it anymore, and it gives up. And that's where it impacts the communication from the body to the mind and the mind to the body, and that fusion. And that's why, like, my logo is half brain, half fire. It's like the internal fire and then fusing with the brain. It's when we can have those communicating in tandem in the right way. That's where the magic can start to happen, and you start to realize certain things. But the suicide aspect of it all is because I don't want to see guys. I want to see them start being proactive and say, I do need help. Or the people that love them, they know that this guy he's too stubborn to actually help himself out, where people start stepping up and saying, I need to find help for him, and just force him to do this because he won't do it himself. But I want people to get to a point of where they find joy in the journey of life. They find the reason for living, and know that it's not all going to be rainbows and butterflies, like I said before, but there are going to be pieces that are going to be tough, but to where you can start to operate in those tough moments that happen in your present life and not attach them to the pain of the existence of who you're responding as from your childhood, or like a painful situation. Because that's why we respond in negative ways to situations, because it has something to do with a response and a survival tactic that we built from a previous experience in a younger life. And it could be generational stuff too, which gets really deep, and I don't want to go into all that. But
sure.
It's I don't want people to live that way anymore. Like I want them to be able to embrace suffering just as much as they embrace love and they embrace achievement.
Yeah.
Which are the three things that Viktor Frankl talks about in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. Is we find worth in like how we deal with these three things: is achievement, like achieving a goal, accolades, stuff like that. Love, whether it be from a family, friend, a partner, whatever, and suffering. And suffering is because he went through concentration camp in the Holocaust and survived, and the people that survived through that process found meaning in the suffering. And we have to find, there's always going to be suffering. We have to find meaning in that suffering. And it's anybody who commits suicide that they can't find meaning in the suffering anymore. So, and because they're constantly living in a state of suffering from pain of not being who they're supposed to be, or pain from a past experience, or pain from whatever. They can't, it's like if someone gets in a car accident and their 2 children die and they just can't live any longer with that pain. They have to find meaning in that somehow, some way, to realize like what their new purpose is supposed to be from that. And their purpose isn't to kill themselves, because their purpose is to find something deeper inside of that, and why, and to alter their life and shift their life into in a more impactful way than how they're currently operating. And that's the whole thing that I want people to start finding out, because suicide isn't the way. And it is a very selfish act, because now you're leaving behind all the people that love you. And it's selfish, but it's also, it's an act of desperation, and it's an act of like, I just can't do it anymore. And I don't want to see that kind of pain in the world. There's always going to be pain, but I want people to embrace the pain and find the beauty in the pain and the suffering, and realize this is happening to teach me something. And that only comes, we only are aware of that when we come into the awareness of realizing what that's for, instead of just operating from a herd mentality of just being like cows and sheep and being directed into having a corporate job where it's like you just, and nothing against corporate jobs, but it's like literally when you start not even knowing why you're doing what you're doing. And then all of a sudden one day a brick wall hits you and you're like, fuck me, like my life sucks. And you just want to end it all. And that, I want people to start getting a heightened sense of awareness of who they truly are at their core, and embracing all of it to where they don't ever have to come to that point of, do I end my life or do I not?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for talking through that. It's beautiful and well said and articulate. And just to reiterate a few things that you said, corporate jobs are great. I got one. Yeah. I work a Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Exactly. And what I found is that for me, it funds the podcast. Yeah. And I was even talking with someone about when the podcast starts to monetize, will I quit? And that's probably 2 or 3 years down the road, where it would be matching my current salary. But even at that point, I was like, I don't know. We'll have to revisit it, because they do take care of health, dental, vision, 401k. Yeah. If someone sues me for something I did for that company, we have an army of lawyers that can just go take care of that. So there's a bunch of benefits. But, and I would also say that not everyone has to go start a podcast while they're working for their 9 to 5. But if you are feeling bored, frustrated, anxious, can you take a moment to examine that? And even just my one of my neighbors across the street, he's going on like 120 something-ish days sober. He forgot the exact day from weed. Amazing. But what he noticed was that he was spending a lot of time really anxious, and he had no idea why. And he also, probably about like once a month, give or take, would have these weird episodes where he would just faint. He would just lose consciousness. Wow. And so he thought, let's do an experiment and take 30 days off of weed. And after 30 days, he felt really good, and he went another 60 days, another 30 days, leading to 60, and then 90. Then he smoked a few times, didn't really like it, and then he decided, I'm just going to get away from this completely for now, because I've noticed that my anxiety has gone down, and my fainting has also gone away. And no doctor ever correlated the two things. This is just him observing his actions and what he put in his body, and then what resulted as part of it. And so he still has the same corporate 9 to 5 job, but he was able to say, to take an honest look at, I feel really anxious. Is it the job? Is this something I need to quit? Am I bored at work? Is it the weed? Is it something else? Is it the relationship I am? And after taking a honest evaluation of everything, he concluded it was probably the weed, and then he took that step for himself. And he even said that last weekend when he went out to a show, he found himself talking to a lot of people where normally he'd just get really high and just sort of sit in the corner, and he was like, I had so much more fun. Yeah. And so he is not saying nobody ever should not smoke weed again, right. But for him in his stage of life, he is significantly happier and a lot less anxious, and hasn't fainted in 4 months. So he's running with it.
That's huge. I mean, and that's, that comes from the awareness of him observing who he is, and taking himself out of the situation, looking from a wider lens. And yeah, not everybody operates the same way. Some people like demonize alcohol. Some people demonize weed. Can they be used as numbing mechanisms? Absolutely. Sure. is it always that way? No, because I know a lot of people, I'm more spiritual by nature. I don't see myself as religious. I was raised Roman Catholic, but I don't see myself that way. And, anymore. I see myself as a very spiritual person. And I heard somebody say, Les Brown said, I don't know where he got it from, but he said he's not religious either. He said, I'm spiritual. He goes, spiritual people or religious people fear going to hell. Spiritual people have been there. And I was like, it's pretty wild. I was like, that's pretty spot on.
Been there.
And I just was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, and a lot of people I know that have demonized, like alcohol, for example, because I still drink. I mean, for me, I don't drink a lot, but I drink and I enjoy a good whiskey and a good craft beer. And, but I just tell people, I'm like, if a lot of them are very like religious people and they've gone down the rabbit hole of, being borderline alcoholic or just relying too much on alcohol to numb, and then they've come out of it. Now I hear a lot of people demonizing, and I said, well, if it's that bad, then why did Jesus create wine from water? Why did he use it as a sacrament? Like, why was that? If you're like truly wondering, like, why did he even do that? Because I'm like, especially when he created water or wine from water, he did so at a wedding. Like, he saw probably people like in a joyous state and enjoying themselves, like it's a celebration. And he just saw that this wine probably was creating even more joy. So I'm like, alcohol isn't really the poison. It can be. Of course, it can kill you if you drink too much, but almost anything in excess is not good for you. Right. Too much water can send you into the hospital because it'll deplete vital nutrients and minerals in your body. So it's, I don't see alcohol necessarily as the poison itself. I see the state that the person's in that is consuming it. So just like weed, a lot of people can smoke weed and just have an amazing time. Right. But if you're smoking weed in a depressed state, it's going to perpetuate that state. Just like drinking, if you're drinking and you're in a joyful state and you know when to cut it off, so you don't have a hangover the next day, of course, but you're just enjoying yourself, it's just going to perpetuate that joy. But if you're drinking in a negative state because you're depressed or you're pissed or you're anxious about work, or you don't like your work, and because maybe he's numbing because of work, because that's why he's smoking weed, then it's just going to perpetuate that. And it's going to continue. And that's why people probably get liver disease from alcohol. Some people do. And I'm sure there's a lot more genetics to it. But when you're looking at how things associate with the body, maybe some people get liver disease because they're drinking always from a negative state, where some people can drink their whole life and not die from anything, not have any liver issues, and they've been drinking their whole life because maybe they're just drinking more from a joyful state. Like, you see these places like the blue zones and you're like, Jesus, how are these people drinking wine their whole life every single day and they don't have any liver problems? It's probably because they're drinking because they're around people they love, the people they care about. It's the environment that they're in. It's the state of life that they have. And that's where it's like understanding the deeper side of anything that we use as a numbing mechanism, or because it doesn't always have to be that way, so. Yeah.
When you mentioned Les Brown, I saw this on your post, and I believe I heard him say this on a podcast back in like 2016, 2017, so I hope I don't completely butcher it, but as they were wrapping up their episode, and as we're wrapping up this episode, we still got a couple minutes left, but we're getting there. Les was speculating that the ideal way to die would probably be to be on your deathbed, surrounded by friends and loved ones, saying a prayer for you as you hopefully peacefully pass over into whatever happens after you die. Mm-hmm. But imagine if you would instead of all your loved ones surrounding you, you had all the ghosts of your talents and your skills and your dreams, your ideas, and all of these ghosts came to you as you were about to pass over and said, we came to you, Jeff, we came to you, and you spent 80 years doing nothing with us, and now we must die with you. Like,
always gives me goosebumps.
It's that would be, I'd say if we had a theme for this episode, that we didn't show up today to say don't go into sports or do go into door-to-door sales, but more of like, are you able to let go of your ego and then act on that dream, even if you think it's stupid, like, oh, I've never done this because either people will laugh at me or because my parents would be ashamed of me, or, you know, mom and dad wanted me to get the corporate job. But like, really, what's going to be worse, you know, to be on your deathbed and, man, why did I never start that podcast? And now I'm about to die. Or if I do this, you know, you even said in one of your other posts, what's the worst that's going to happen? Is it going to kill you?
Right.
You know, starting this podcast won't kill me.
Right.
Going to a coach and saying you need help will not kill you. So really, like, what's the worst case scenario? Maybe a little bit of time, a little bit of money, and then hopefully you walk away a better person, and it's only a best case scenario.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. Yeah, it's wild because we are our biggest obstacle, and it's the ego. Some people are like, well, that's not very like, ego driven if you just don't act on your thing. I'm like, it is, because your ego's trying to keep you safe. So it's telling you you're not worthy because all of the conditioning of like your past life of like maybe your parents saying, just do this and like get married and like don't do anything crazy because we don't want to see you on the streets if like you're trying to be an entrepreneur or a musician and you're not making it. They don't want to see you go through struggle and pain, but really it's in the struggle and the pain that's going to create the man or the woman that you're supposed to be. And yeah, I mean, what's the one thing people regret the most on their deathbed? It's the thing that they didn't do. It's not the person they talked to. It's not asking that girl out on the date. It's not the job that they applied for that they didn't get. It's the job that they didn't apply for. It's the passion that they didn't pursue. It's the girl that they didn't ask out on the date. It's always the what if I had just done that? And it's like, man, that fucking sucks. Like, you know, it really does.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and that if that doesn't wake people up enough at that point, it's and then it's just, but it's I'm not saying you got to be just rampant and just like out of control and doing all like crazy stuff, but it's just saying, okay, who am I? What am I really like? What is it I really want? And then just taking that first step, because, you know, belief and confidence comes from actually results typically. So, but it's encouraging that belief and saying, I will have more confidence as I get more results, but I just have to take that first step. Just take that first step and do it. It's going to be scary. It's going to be uncomfortable. But I got to do it because I don't want to go out knowing that I didn't give it my all. Like, yeah. I want to know that when it's my time that I can smile and say I did everything I possibly could.
Yeah. Can I tell you about something that we were talking a little bit about off mic that's super fucking exciting for me right now?
Yeah.
I'm sure that when I'm not even sure. I know I'm going to post that picture of me and Chris Williamson on a few different media sites just because, like, it was so fucking cool to meet him in person and talk with him for 5 minutes. And I am positive there will be at least one person, if not more, who will probably think, like, oh, David got lucky that he met Chris, or maybe even have some resentment, you know, like, fuck this guy for, you know, bragging about this. And maybe they're just like jealous. And 100%. On the lucky side of things, it's funny because I had to make a really big decision to say to all my friends and family, I'm going to move 1,800 miles away to start a podcast. And some of them said, like, why do you have to do that? I just do. Just trust me on this one. I need to put myself in exile from all you guys for a couple of months and just get this thing up and running. Wow. And then I, started reaching out to guests to come on the show. And one of them is a comedian who is an ex-heroin addict, now 6 years sober from that, was one of the first 3 guests on the show before we had a single episode live, when I had no credibility, no validation. You could look up David O'Clair and you would just find my LinkedIn page with my accounting degree. And then, now knocked out another 37 episodes, working on this thing 8 to 12 hours a week. It's all been my personal money. I've soaked into it. And then last night, that exact same comedian, knowing that I uprooted my life highly because of Chris's influence on me, it was not an admin person, it was that comedian. He called me and said, hey, Chris is going to be at the show tomorrow night. If you'd be willing to work the bar, I can get you essentially a front row seat and you can see the entire thing and meet Chris.
That's amazing.
And so it's funny. It's not funny, but I don't say that to toot my own horn, but to tell someone who's out there, who has not started acting on their own idea or their own dream, and they're worried about those people who are like, oh, David was just lucky. I don't really care about them anymore because I know the thousands of dollars and thousands of hours, all the steps that I had to take that led me to meeting Chris. And now I've hit that. It wasn't necessarily a milestone or a goal to meet him, but it was just sort of a crazy moment of like, this isn't fucking my life. I'm not in Austin right now. I'm not standing on a stage with my arm around Chris talking about how we're both podcasters. Like, what the fuck is this? But if you just start taking those baby steps, it doesn't have to be anything big. Yeah. Just do something, whatever that idea is, and start moving in the right direction, and you'll get there.
Yeah, it's and that's the thing, man. It's like, do what you have to do, and it doesn't matter. It's your journey, and yeah, that's so beautiful, man, because you don't know where it's going to lead you. And that's the thing. It's like, and people say that someone's lucky or, yeah, that was just luck. I'm like, that's where like luck is really usually a combination of, sometimes like shit just falls in our lap. We're like, wow, that was fucking awesome.
Totally. Yep.
But most of the time it's when opportunity meets like perspiration. It's like that opportunity's finally come because you've put in the sweat equity to get there. And all of a sudden, like, you're there, and you're like, it gives you that validation of saying, okay, I am doing the right thing. It may be small, it may be a small win, but it's celebrating those small wins, celebrating those moments, and not just getting so bogged down in all the detail of it, and just always trying to strive for the next thing. But those types of things happen only because you've decided to take that passive, persistent action of just constantly going and doing and doing and doing, which is awesome.
Passive persistence.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Thanks, man.
Anything else that you wanna talk about tonight?
I mean, I know I've mentioned stuff. I'll try to be very succinct because I talked a lot about the whole mindset work and the epiphany moment of 2014 and reshaping my life through mindset. A lot of stuff was still very underlying for me in life, and I could overpower everything, but there was always, you'd fall back into this, like, why does this still feel uneasy? Why is something not resonating for me? And I went through like a really bad breakup, and it caused me to have my only anxiety attack I have ever had in my life. And it was in that moment of hyperventilating and feeling a sense of loss because over this breakup, and I never felt that way over a breakup. Like I'd had, this wasn't even one of my marriages. This was just someone I was dating, and it was just very painful. And I just remember in that moment of that pain and then hyperventilating, the image of my father chasing my father down the street when I was 5 when he was driving away one day popped up. And I'm like, why the fuck is that popping up? In the midst of sitting there thinking about this girl that we just broke up and the pain of all of it, why is that coming up? And I always say that anxiety attack was my first breathwork session because it was it's very rhythmic breathing when you're hyperventilating. And it's, wow. It showed me something that I'm like, what is this shit? And that's when I really started the journey about a little over 2 years ago of this internal work. And I went through a lot of discovering of past traumas and things I was holding on to, and why I had a poor money mindset around certain things that was tied to my second wife who I had the affair on. And at the end of the relationship that I correlated I started burning through like all of my money that I had after that. And it started with me giving half of her what I had earned in my retirement anyway at that point, because I just felt guilty. And she didn't even know at the time that anything had happened. And, but I just felt like, okay, that'll make me feel better. But I still didn't feel worthy because I felt like if I could still do this, if I had the capacity to do the thing that my dad did to my mom, leaving my mom in a really bad financial bind, in which I kind of left my second wife in a financial bind, then I wasn't worthy of the money that I deserved or that I had. And so I just started pissing it away. And I didn't even know I was doing it consciously. Like it wasn't until July of last year through a breathwork session that I wanted to understand why I was having a hard time with deserving more of things or something, just abundance. And in that breathwork session, I saw her and my second wife. I'm like, why the fuck is she popping up in my breathwork session? And then as I journaled and integrated afterwards, I was like, oh shit, like that's because that's when I started to piss all the stuff I had earned up to that point. I started pissing it away. So I came to peace with that, and I was able to be like, okay, I don't have to hold on to that anymore. It's not me. I've learned from that. I've grown from that. I don't have that block anymore. But a lot of things I still had some unworthiness issues, still holding on to pain of certain things with in relationships, and not understanding why things happen the way they did. And I did an energy work session with a woman that was really helpful to help kind of open up like my throat chakra and be able to like start speaking some more of my truth of life. But yet I could still see and feel limiting beliefs in certain things of who I was. And, and all this was outside of mindset work, because it was like, and what I've realized is that our mindset is only as powerful as to the level which we've dealt with the traumas in our life. And if we haven't dealt with and come to peace with our pain in our past, they'll always be there. It'll always continue to persist. And just like the shadow, just like, chasing you down the street and then being in front of you and always around you. And it's always going to be there until you deal with it and you come to peace with that and you accept all of who you are. You accept your parents and all your generational lineage of who they were, and just start leaning into your own personal power of who you are, and just the true essence of that child that before the world really started to impact them in a way that shaped their life. It's like that child with all the wonder in their eyes of just wanting to be the bigger version of themselves. And that's when I couldn't release it, and I didn't really know what it was. And that's when I did the plant medicine journey. And that was it was all the work I did leading up to that made that so impactful. But it was that night felt like 12 years of therapy in one night. Like it was just like, it was more impactful than 12 years of therapy. And it was, but it was in that moment that I realized that the internal work is where it's at. Like the mind is extremely powerful in social media, and all we see in our world is mindset, overpower, overcome. It's all, and I agree to an extent, yet there is as I said before, your mind is only as strong as the level at which we've dealt with our traumas. And because the mind, you'll always go back down and reset back into this. There's something uncomfortable. It's just like these multimillionaires that struggle with life. It's because they haven't dealt with the thing that caused them to even get to where they are in that success, that they're always dealing with that pain. And it's once you finally tap in and start listening to the body, it shifts everything. And right after I did that, like I did read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. The body keeps the score, which is extremely powerful about how we store trauma in our body. There's certain parts of our body where men store a lot in our hips and our knees and our shoulders, our back. It's depending on what that pain is correlated to. But I realized so much it's been so much more about helping people tap the inner side of them and to their heart. Because the first thing that's formed, they say the first brain is your gut, then it's your heart, and then it's the brain is the last thing. But if we learn to use it in the right way, because the body actually communicates to the brain at 2 times the rate that the brain communicates to the body. So our body's always constantly communicating and telling us things, but we don't listen to it. Our brain is always overpowering, because that's what we're taught. It's like, no. That's classic overthinking. It's when we overthink and we always think that we don't follow that initial feeling, because our conditioning has told us, no, this is the way. And it's learning to step back from all the noise and just sit back with yourself in silence and say, what is my gut really telling me? What is my heart telling me to do? And I tell people, you got to make your decisions from here And then from here is where you can expand on that decision. And that's where, you feel like you starting the podcast. You're like, that was probably an internal thing. You're like, I've got to do this. Like, this is something I have to do. And then your brain is what creates the expansion of that idea. Your brain is where it takes it to that next level of saying, because that's where the brain is amazing. Like, because then at that point, there's going to be times where you're like, oh, I just want to stop. But then your brain's like, nope. Like, let's keep going. Like, I'm going to give you another idea. But it's when you start to realize that fusion of where and how to correlate and communicate with your body to the brain and the brain to the body, that everything starts to shift in a totally different perspective. But that's why I try to tell people, mindset's great, but you got to heal what is inside you that you're holding on to, whatever that is, because we're all holding on to something. And coming to peace with your past and coming to peace with your pain is the catalyst for just absolute expansion for anybody. And that's why in my group coaching program that I do, it's called Explore, Express, Expand, because it's about exploring inward to express outward and to expand on an exponential level. So, and that's the whole concept around that. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well said.
Thanks, man.
You mind if I use the bathroom real quick?
Yeah.
I'll be right back.
Yeah, absolutely. I could just maybe want to elaborate on the plant medicine thing, as far as I encourage people to do it if they feel called to do it, but it can't just be something that you just do just to be like, oh, okay, I'm going to do it and expect it to heal you. And I think that's the problem. And it's been over popularized and utilized in our society now, where people are doing it a lot. And I get a lot of people have a lot of things they have to work through, but I feel that it's got to be something that calls to you and says, like, okay, you've done the work. You've done a lot of work on yourself. This is going to be, you don't need plant medicine, but it just quickens the process. But it's going to allow you to see things in a way that you weren't capable of seeing because of all of the conditioning that's happened. And you're basically deconditioning yourself to recondition yourself into the new world of who you're supposed to be. And that's the beautiful thing, is it literally strips your neural pathways and forms new ones and creates new paradigms of a belief system that you're like, okay, this is actually possible. All of the things that I've been thinking are actually true. And I just need to learn and step into it and see things on a different perspective. And you go on with anything like this with a very clear intention. And that intention, I tell people, it's like, just don't attach to an expectation of what that intention is going to show you. Just go in with the intention of, like, say it's like, I want to figure out where I'm lacking confidence or whatever it is. The intention is, but don't attach to what that looks like when it comes to you. Whatever it shows you is what it's supposed to show you. And then it's your job at that point to start integrating after, because that's where the real work starts, is after the ceremony, is to start integrating and start working through and journaling and talking through with yourself on, like, what does that look like? How is this going to work in my life now? How do I move forward to step into a more empowered state? And that's one of the things I've found in the process, is that you'll always have triggers in life, and your triggers are your traumas, and your traumas are the things that you have to deal with. But now that I've learned what that looks like in my life, initially that first reaction might be like that triggered response that we're conditioned to do. But then I'm like, hold on. I am no longer that person. That was part of my past. That past, because when we react in a certain way, we believe that trauma of our past that caused that initial feeling and energy is currently happening in that present moment. And you have to step away. Now I can step away from that. And that's what people need to work on, is like stepping back and being more the observer in that moment, being outside themselves and saying, how can I respond in a more empowered state, and in a state that is not only beneficial for me and my well-being, but also beneficial to the greater good of everybody else and everything else, whether it be the universe, God, whatever source, whatever people want to call it. And
right.
It's learning to lean into that. And that's what the plant medicine did for me. But I've been very intentional about making sure I don't, because you can very easily fall back into, it doesn't heal you, it just shows you the new way. And you can fall back into your old patterns if you're not careful. And there's always going to be times like where things like that happen. I got injured in June, or end of May, beginning of June this year, and wasn't able to work out for about a month. And I was, it just like, I tweaked my back, and I immediately felt myself gravitating to want to have some more drinks than normal. And it was like I was like, whoa, what the fuck is this coming up for?
Yeah,
like, why?
Yeah.
And it just, then I caught myself, and I'm like, I need to, okay, that was how I would always respond in the past. Because it was tied to an initial coping mechanism, a numbing mechanism of not dealing with pain in the way that I need and working through it. So, and that's the whole thing, is like just working through it. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be painful, but you got to work through those, because then the next time it happens, it won't impact you the way that it did, or the impact will be a lot less. And then it's just, you become that much stronger of a human being, stronger in your own presence and your own power. So, yeah.
I loved your cow and bison analogy a couple hours ago.
Oh, yeah.
Because one thing, maybe you said this, maybe you didn't, but another advantage too about charging right into the storm is that you're going to have that much more strength as well.
Yeah.
I think, you did say that. If the cow's been running away, now their strength is depleted, they got nothing, and they got to deal with the storm anyways. But if you just automatically say, I'm going to take this head on because I know there's an issue here, you're going to be that much better off for it. But absolutely. I've absolutely loved this episode, because one thing that you did sort of naturally was, I always sometimes will end an episode by saying, do you have something that if someone wanted to work on themselves, what's a good takeaway for them? But you've already given us like 7, you could check out breath work. You could check out getting a coach or a therapist or whatever their title is, getting someone else in your life who you can talk to so you can get an outside opinion on them. There's the plant ceremonies, which are are very prevalent here, at least in the Austin area. And I actually have someone coming on in about 3 weeks who has studied the evolution of these ceremonies, starting around like 2010 to 2013, and how Austin specifically has got to where they are today with them. So I'm really excited just to get her perspective on, what she's observed. But you got that. We got a couple of book recs, such as Body Keeps a Score. There is something you said about that one specifically. I'm at least going to look up the synopsis. And the other one was Man's Search for Meaning. So there's 2 books that you could either buy or get on Audible. And even just little stuff that you said, such as looking at, my health. Am I is wealthy the amount of money I have, in the idea of WAEALTHY, or am I a well person and I feel well off because of my inner joy, my inner peace, and not necessarily the dollar amount that's in the bank. So thank you so much, Jeff, for everything that you've covered over the last couple hours.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think we're good to go. You feel good to go?
Yeah,
I feel good to go.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thankful for you having me on here. I know we just meeting for the first time, like in person, but this has been awesome, dude.
It has been.
Yeah, it's super good.
Before we go, I usually tell everyone to please like, subscribe, rate, review the podcast, blah, 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 blah. I thought we could do something different if you're down, and rate each other's podcasts in real time.
Yeah, let's do it.
And so if you have your phone on you, what we'll do, so grab your phone as well. If anyone's stuck with us for 2 hours and 29 minutes and 12 seconds, I'm assuming you liked the episode.
I hope so.
So if you did, do us a huge favor and look up David Saturday Night Sitback. In my case, I'm looking up Athletes Afterlife with Jeff Murray. And on Spotify, all you got to do is, if it's not letting you play, which in this case it's not, I'm going to hit play on his most recent episode. And then I just fast forward it to the very end. And now Spotify thinks I have listened to an episode. And when I go back, it allows me to tap where it says no rating at the very top. And I can now hit 5 stars. And I hit submit. And boom, there you go. There's a rating for Jeff on Spotify. Then if you go over to Apple Podcasts, which is the pink icon, and it sort of looks like there's a person with some like radioactive waves coming out of his head, or maybe it's a radar. I'm going to look up again either David Saturday Night Sitback and Athletes Afterlife. And when you go to the homepage of the show, it's a little bit different. You're going to have to scroll down just a tad through about like 8 to 12 episodes. And then you're going to see a place where it says tap to rate. So I'm going to give them 5 stars. But then there's also a place where you can write a review. And for the sake of, I'm going to write him a more thoughtful review later because I did listen to a couple episodes and I do want to comment on them. But if you don't want to write out something long, Apple only requires a title and at least one word where it says review. So if I wanted to, I could have made the title, listen to the podcast, and then the review could have been great pod, and then you can hit send and Apple submits that. But as I said, I'm going to write something more thoughtful out in a little bit. And then if you're on YouTube, it's super easy. All you do is you look up the homepage and then just subscribe to that. And the reason I bring this up in every episode and that me and Jeff were talking about how to get ratings before we turned on the mics and whatnot is not because we care that much about the number of ratings, but because I have a delusional belief that there are dozens, if not hundreds of, unfortunately, maybe even more than that, men and women throughout the world right now who are dealing with one of the many topics that we discussed tonight. But the only way we can get Jeff's story into their ear is with your guys' help. So Jeff did his part by coming on the show and being extremely genuine and transparent and funny. I did my part by hosting the podcast, but now we need you guys to do your part and take these 3 actions that take under 5 minutes of your time and $0 of your dollars to help spread these stories as far and wide as possible. In the meantime, everyone, thanks for tuning in to another episode of David's Saturday Night Sit Back. I hope that you guys have a healthy and happy week, and we will see you next Saturday. Take care, guys. Bye.